Chapter 292. She was separated from Qin Shi. Upon realizing this, Tiange heaved a sigh. There were so many strange things in Immortal's ruins that she had to think about every step she took. Under such circumstances, it was really difficult to move forward without someone she could trust. Jing Xingji was a person Qin Shi thought was generally trustworthy, but that wasn't necessarily true for her. This person was a typical utilitarian. Even though he was used to fawning over women and had thrown her countless flirtatious glances along the way, in the depths of his heart, he only used strength to measure strength. If there was any possibility of her dragging him down, he would unceremoniously leave her behind. Thinking of this, Tiange cheered up. In any case, she had to persevere and find Qin Shi. Fellow Daoist Jing, what do you think about the current situation? Upon hearing her question, Jing Xingji still looked lazy and said, "There's something wrong with this fog." Nonsense, she also knew there was something wrong. Seeing that Jing Xingji was just dealing with her, Tiange said bluntly, "With fellow Daoist Jing's experience, you should know more than this, right?" Jing Xingji smiled and glanced at her. "I also know that this fog has a great impact on divine senses. Fellow Daoist Jingwei, your divine sense can't play any role here." Tiange's eyes moved, but she didn't say anything. Jing Xingji's current attitude was very clear. He wanted to see if she had a way. If she had a way, he might try his best. If she didn't, he probably didn't want to carry a burden. Realizing this, Tiange lowered her head and pondered. Divine sense. All of a sudden, she asked, "Fellow Daoist Jing, when we were separated just now, what did you feel?" Jing Xingji thought for a while, then said, I didn't feel anything. It was like I was lost in thought for a while, and when I turned around, I found you were gone." Tiange nodded. "It seems this fog can paralyze our divine senses and make our senses wrong." Jing Xingji nodded carelessly. Tiange said, "I'm afraid it's more than that. Even if it paralyzes our divine senses, there's no reason we can't find them by the time we react. Perhaps it can even mislead our senses." Upon hearing this, Jing Xingji took another look at her. Tiange didn't understand the meaning behind his gaze, so she continued to say, "That being the case, we can't trust our divine senses and senses." Jing Xingji chuckled. "That being the case, does fellow Daoist Qingwei have a solution?" His attitude was very casual. Obviously, he didn't think Tiange could solve the current situation. Without saying anything, Tiange took out a flying sword from her qianquan bag, then lowered her head and started to carve something on the ground. In fact, Jing Xingji knew very well in his heart that Qin Shi had high standards. Since this junior martial sister of his was accepted as Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple and also received special treatment from him, she definitely had some outstanding qualities. Jing Xingji didn't believe that guy, Qin Shoujing, would take a fancy to an idiot. However, he also didn't think too highly of Tiange because the so-called title of genius was too exaggerated. People who cultivated fast might not necessarily be strong, and people with high comprehension might not necessarily be quick-witted. But when he saw what Tiange drew on the ground, his expression turned serious. Tiange put away her flying sword and took out a sound-transmitting jade talisman from her robe. This jade talisman was a 1,000 miles sound-transmitting talisman. It was prepared to be used when they were separated, but she didn't have many of them, so she didn't use them immediately when they were separated to avoid wasting them in the fog. The sound-transmitting jade talisman ignited with a fiery red light. It was about to break through the sky and fly away, but it fell again after flying only several feet. Jing Xingji was disappointed. Even the sound-transmitting talisman doesn't work? Tiange was only stunned for a moment. She then continued to draw her flying sword and carve on the ground. What she drew was the position of an ancient 8 trigrams formation diagram, which came from the Xuanji formation book. In the fog, the naked eye could only see several feet ahead. If they walked casually, they would be like a headless fly, unable to distinguish directions. If they walked according to this 8 trigrams formation diagram, they would at least know which direction they were going and wouldn't go astray. Even if it was a dead end, they could go back the way they came. After she finished drawing the formation diagram, Tiange carefully examined the surrounding scenery. After confirming there was no danger, she chose a direction and took the lead. Xianxia lowered his head to look at the formation diagram she drew. Without saying anything, he followed her. This time, the two of them didn't get separated. Since they knew the fog could paralyze divine senses, the two of them were very careful. After walking for a while, Tiange once again drew the formation diagram and repeated the process several times. Since the sound-transmitting talisman couldn't be used, she could only leave an imprint. Although she couldn't be considered proficient in formations, he should be able to recognize her words. If he saw her, he could follow the formation diagram to find her, and the two of them could reunite. Just like that, she and Xianxia walked further and further away from each other. She soon realized he was lost. Moreover, when he turned around, Tiange and Xianxia were nowhere to be seen. He didn't panic. He unfolded the 3-yang real fire sword and circled around his body. He then closed his eyes and spread his divine sense. But soon he discovered he couldn't spread his divine sense, and he couldn't even use the sound-transmitting talisman. Realizing his situation, she thought for a while and did the same thing as Tiange. He took medicinal pills and meditated. Unfortunately, during this period of time when he was calm, no one came to pat him on the shoulder. After a long time, he opened his eyes and found his divine sense still couldn't spread in the fog. It seemed the fog itself was blocking his divine sense, not his divine sense being disturbed by the fog. He sat for a while, but the solution he chose was completely different from Tiange's. He wasn't good at formations, so he didn't think of using formations as a mark. Instead, he waved his sleeves and brandished the sword light of the 3-yang real fire sword, burning the fog. Under the pressure of the fiery red sword light, the fog dispersed, but when he stopped for a moment, it swept over again. She stopped. This fog was very similar to the light smoke just now. Although it wasn't corrosive, it wasn't afraid of his sword light either. After thinking for a while, he straightened the sword and wiped the sword with 2 fingers of his right hand. Blood flowed out, emitting a dazzling light. He didn't tell Xianxia the truth. Extreme yang real fire could be used to defend against enemies. The 3-yang real fire sword once again brandished the sword light. Under the extreme yang real fire, the fog was finally burned away bit by bit, and a bright view appeared. She stopped using the extreme yang real fire sword and cautiously walked forward. He hadn't walked far when he suddenly heard a loud rumble. She listened attentively, and his expression changed. This was the sound of fighting. Moreover, the sound wasn't small, it was at least a nascent soul cultivator. He only thought for a moment before he used his body technique and ran toward the source of the sound. He had been separated from Tiange, but he was sure she wasn't too far away. The sound was too loud, so Tiange would definitely hear it. At that time, the two of them could meet at the source of the sound. After flying for a while, the fog around him became thinner and thinner without him noticing, and he finally ran out of the scope of the fog. But this didn't make she feel relieved, because as soon as he came out of the fog, he was locked on by several divine senses. This place was a huge crater. It was said that this crater was left behind by the immortals of the distant past era who used some earth-shattering fire magic art. For millions of years, the fire had never been extinguished. There was also a legend that the fire in this volcano was comparable to the Samadhi real fire, one of the 3 great real fires. Unfortunately, for so many years, no one had ever been able to take away the real fire. Now, there were 2 groups of 4 nascent soul cultivators standing on the edge of this crater. There were 3 people on one side, and there was only 1 cultivator wrapped in black aura on the other side. She glanced at them and frowned because the nascent soul cultivator standing alone was the number 1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole, Master Song Feng. Although he looked calm, he was complaining in his heart. He wasn't afraid of other nascent soul cultivators. After all, he was Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple and his cultivation level wasn't bad, so others would always give him some face. Even if they didn't give him face, he could always run away if he couldn't defeat them. But this Master Song Feng was an anomaly. This person had a grudge against both his master and himself, and he was also very skilled. When he left Mount Taikong last time, he was almost killed by Master Song Feng. If he hadn't launched a secret technique in time and the nascent soul cultivators from his school hadn't come to greet him, he would have lost his life. Now, they met this person on Demonic Mountain. He just hoped Tiange wouldn't come. Otherwise, it would be even more difficult for the two of them to escape. Oh! Master Song Feng was quite surprised to see him, but then he chuckled and said, "God treats me well today. Qin Shoujing, you little kid actually delivered yourself to my door." At that moment, Qin Shi's gaze swept over the three nascent soul cultivators in front of Master Song Feng, and his heart settled. The three nascent soul cultivators were all in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. One was a young female cultivator, one was a middle-aged scholar, and the last was a handsome Daoist. He knew all three of them. The young female cultivator and the middle-aged scholar were wearing elegant white clothes with green hairpins and clouds embroidered on their cuffs. They were a pair of Dao companions from Biyun sect. The female cultivator was called Ding Luan, and the scholar was called Feng Xiao. They were known as the Luan and Feng immortal couple in the celestial pole. They were the only pair of Dao companions whose cultivation levels were above the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, so they were very famous. The handsome Daoist was surnamed Ji, and people called him Daoist Priest Ji. He was from Tiandao sect. These three people all had some friendship with his master, and their relationship was passable. Judging from the current situation, they had already fallen out with Master Song Feng, so they would more or less protect him. Thinking up to this point, he smiled slightly and didn't pay attention to Master Song Feng. Instead, he politely saluted the three nascent soul cultivators. "Senior Ding, Senior Feng, Senior Ji, it's been a long time since we last met. Seniors, are you all well?" Seeing that he was so polite, Ding Luan smiled and said, "Qin brat, why are you also here? Where's your master?" Qin Shi was already 200 years old. Among core formation cultivators, he could be considered young, but he wasn't old enough to be called brat casually. Ding Luan, on the other hand, looked like she was in her prime, but her real age was 700 or 800 years old. Calling him brat was an act of respect. Qin Shi said, "Junior came to Demonic Mountain this time on the orders of my master. My master isn't far away and will arrive soon." He naturally made this up to tell Master Song Feng that his master was here. Upon hearing what he said, Master Song Feng snorted coldly. "Qin Shoujing, do you think I'll believe you just because you say it casually? It's best that you delivered yourself to my door today. After I get rid of the three of them, I'll also get rid of you to avenge my poor disciple." Before Qin Shi could answer, Feng Xiao already sneered and said, "Old Song Feng, aren't you afraid that the wind will sprain your tongue? Do you really think you're the #1 cultivator in the celestial pole and invincible? You're just one person. Although our cultivation levels are lower than yours, we're not to be trifled with." Black aura surged on Master Song Feng's body, and he said in a contemptuous tone, "What Luan and Feng immortal couple? I really don't care. Who's the one who sprained his tongue?" Chapter 293. Old Song Feng, Ding Luan said with a smile, but her tone was contemptuous. "If I were you, I would have gone into hiding a long time ago, but you're still so proud of yourself. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by all the cultivators in the world?" Ding Luan looked gentle, but her words were very rude. Master Song Feng, who was used to being scolded, was angry now. He sneered and said, "Laughed at by all the cultivators in the world? Woman surnamed Ding, why don't you drag them out and scold them for me to hear? Why are you still talking nonsense here?" "You're the one who likes to talk nonsense, not me." Ding Luan's tongue was like a knife, but she kept smiling. "Do you really think those kids think you're the #1 cultivator in the celestial pole? I've seen people who think highly of themselves, but I've never seen anyone who thinks so highly of themselves like you. Let's not talk about the past. Let's see if this Qin brat takes you seriously or not." Qin Shi smiled bitterly in his heart. Although he had a grudge against Master Song Feng, he wasn't arrogant enough to think he could escape from a great late-stage nascent soul cultivator with his own strength. Right now, he wanted to use the presence of the 3 nascent soul cultivators to dilute his sense of existence, but this senior Ding pushed him out to attract Master Song Feng's attention. However, he couldn't blame Ding Wan. For Lord Daoist Jinghe's sake, Ding Wan was willing to protect him, which was already good enough. Master Song Feng's figure hidden in the black aura couldn't be seen clearly, but he glanced at them fiercely and said, "Woman Ding, don't talk nonsense. Since you're not willing to give way, don't blame me for being ruthless." As he spoke, his whole body merged into the black aura and suddenly attacked the 3 people. Although their words were full of contempt, the 3 people didn't dare to underestimate Master Song Feng's attack. Ding Wan and Feng Xiao both retreated at the same time, using their teleportation techniques and magic weapons. Both of their magic weapons were musical instruments. Ding Wan held the zither and Feng Xiao held the flute, instantly spreading a thick music net. Master Song Feng's black aura looked fierce, but it was blocked by this music net. Upon seeing this, Daoist Ji smiled faintly. He took out a huge wine gourd from his bosom and took a sip leisurely. All of a sudden, he opened his mouth, and the fine wine in his mouth shot out like an arrow towards Master Song Feng's black aura. Master Song Feng withdrew the devil aura all over his body and swiftly retreated. Although his words were arrogant and his methods were ruthless, he was not an arrogant person. Although he said that he looked down on the Luan and Phoenix immortal couple, he understood in his heart that the couple's cultivation was not bad and their teamwork was quite good. Their fighting strength was not inferior to a late-stage cultivator, so he could not take them lightly. What's more, there was Daoist Ji next to him. Daoist Ji didn't like to talk, and some people even said that he was a mute. However, when he made a move, he was extremely sharp. He often set up hidden traps, and people would unknowingly fall into his trap. Therefore, even though his tone was arrogant, he didn't dare to be careless in his heart and was extremely cautious. However, since he had already made his move, there was no reason for him to stop. As soon as they saw Master Song Feng retreating, Ding Wan and Feng Xiao rushed forward. The sound of the flute changed to the sound of the zither. The music, which was originally as deep as the yellow sky and thick earth, became sonorous and fierce, shaking people's hearts and souls. Xianxia was stimulated by the sound of the zither and flute, and he felt the spiritual aura inside his body surging. He almost couldn't control it, so he immediately steadied his mind and wholeheartedly guided the spiritual aura back. Insignificant skill. Master Song Feng snorted coldly. A black object suddenly flew out of the black aura. Its speed was extremely fast, and it suddenly smashed towards the Luan and Feng couple. As soon as this black object left the range of Master Song Feng's black aura, it suddenly swelled up. In an instant, it became like a small mountain and suddenly pressed down on the Luan and Feng couple. Seeing this, the sound of the Luan and Feng couple changed, becoming simple and deep again. But this time, it wasn't so easy to block. Master Song Feng grinned hideously. The small mountain broke through the net of music and pressed down on the 2 of them with great momentum. Ding Wan and Feng Xiao looked extremely solemn. The couple looked at each other, stopped playing, and each threw the zither and flute in their hands. These 2 magic weapons carried extremely dense spiritual aura, and under the support of the couple's spiritual aura, they suddenly burst into dazzling spiritual light. Xianxia felt it was extremely dazzling, so he couldn't help but raise his hand to block the spiritual light. This wasn't the first time he saw nascent soul cultivators fighting. He had an extraordinarily powerful nascent soul master, so his vision was originally very high. However, when he saw these people fighting, he still felt he couldn't watch them closely. Nascent soul cultivators were nascent soul cultivators after all. Although he was only 1 step away from the nascent soul realm, his strength was still far from them. If he had already formed his nascent soul now, even if he was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, he definitely wouldn't be completely powerless when facing these people. Master Song Feng, Ding Wan and Feng Xiao were fighting fiercely, but there was also a quiet Daoist Ji next to them. Daoist Ji looked to be in his early 20s and looked very delicate. Rumor had it that when he traveled outside, People often regarded him as an aura-refining disciple who didn't understand worldly affairs, but when it came to fighting, he was no less ruthless than Master Song Feng. Over the years, it was unknown how many blind cultivators had been deceived by his harmless appearance and died in his hands. In the spiritual light of the fight between Master Song Feng, Ding Wan and Feng Xiao, She couldn't see their movements clearly, but he knew this was the best time. Therefore, he quietly took out a jade talisman from his Qingquan bag and flicked it with his fingertips. The jade talisman burst into flames and soared into the sky under the cover of the spiritual light. Fortunately, this time, he finally sent it out smoothly. The jade talisman disappeared into the sky, and the fight suddenly stopped. The devil aura on Master Song Feng's body disappeared and he snorted coldly. Qin Shoujing, what the hell are you doing now? She smiled. He knew this old man wouldn't let him go easily even though he hadn't dealt with him yet. Nothing. Junior just wanted to inform my master that there's a good show to watch. Master Song Feng didn't say anything for a while, but the black aura on his body kept surging as if it was brewing and he might attack Qin Shi in the next moment. His attention was focused on Qin Shi, so how could the three nascent soul cultivators let go of this opportunity? Ding Wan shouted. She held the zither with one hand and held the strings with the other, then suddenly pulled and loosened it. The strings suddenly let out a buzzing sound, and the spiritual sound suddenly spread out. Feng Xiao turned his fingers and clasped the jade flute, then he brought it to his lips and blew it in a relaxed manner. The husband and wife, one attacking and one defending, one tightening and one loosening, cooperated seamlessly. Even though Master Song Feng was known as the #1 cultivator in the celestial pole, he didn't dare to look down on them. The black aura on his body became thicker and thicker, and it suddenly scattered like a drop of ink. The black aura on Master Song Feng's body was known as Primordial Devil Aura. If this Primordial Devil Aura danced, it would be like gales and thunder with amazing power. The Primordial Devil Aura scattered and condensed into a long saber that was about to chop the Luan and Feng couple. But in an instant, the black long saber suddenly changed direction and chopped to the right side of the back. There was a scream. It was Daoist Ji, who had just quietly hid behind Master Song Feng. Hearing Daoist Ji scream, Qin Shi's first thought was that this person really wasn't mute. Then he thought that Master Song Feng was worthy of being a great cultivator in the late nascent soul stage. Even a bystander like him couldn't see through him. In the middle of a fight, Master Song Feng could actually beat him at his own game and create a diversion. Master Song Feng snorted. Stinky Daoist, do you really think no one noticed? A vicious expression instantly appeared on Daoist Ji's delicate and harmless face. He ignored the saber of devil aura that had sunk into his shoulder and suddenly flicked his hands. A tiny object flew towards Master Song Feng's face. Master Song Feng was about to dodge, but the two of them were too close. He didn't manage to dodge and was hit. As soon as this thing was thrown onto Master Song Feng's body, it immediately made a huge explosion. This time, it was Master Song Feng's voice. This time, it was Daoist Ji who sneered. He grabbed the saber of devil aura that had sunk into his shoulder, threw it away, and said in a hoarse voice, "Old Song Feng, how does the sky explosion thunder taste?" The primordial devil aura on Master Song Feng's body seemed to have gathered and scattered, and he seemed to have suffered a heavy injury. Ding Wan and Feng Xiao looked at each other and both attacked. Just as Master Song Feng was about to bear the heavy attack of the three nascent soul cultivators, a black shadow flashed. Master Song Feng instantly left his original spot and appeared in midair. The black aura around him condensed and solidified again. Ignorant children. Master Song Feng snorted coldly. Do you really think that I'll be at your mercy after taking this blow? At this time, he was floating in midair, and his primordial devil aura didn't diminish at all. It seemed that he hadn't been injured at all. The three nascent soul cultivators were stunned, and a look of surprise appeared on their faces. Fellow Daoist Ji, Ding Wan said in a low voice, "This is..." Daoist Ji was also in disbelief. The expression on his face kept changing. He stared at Master Song Feng and said, "Impossible, he's bluffing." Fellow Daoists, you know the power of the sky explosion thunder. This old man took it head-on. I absolutely don't believe he's fine. Feng Zhao's expression changed for a while, and then he said, fellow Daoist Ji is right. Sister Luan, don't be fooled by him. Hearing what her husband said, Ding Luan no longer had any doubts. She put away her zither and was ready to go. Right at this moment, several flight lights suddenly flashed across the sky and came in their direction. The incoming people were also divided into two groups, coming from two different directions. Old Daoist fooling. Feng Zhao murmured as he looked at the group of people that gradually became clearer. Daoist Ji's expression darkened. More than 100 years ago, I had some conflicts with this old Daoist. I'm afraid Ding Luan and Feng Zhao were silent. Old Daoist Fuling should actually be called Venerable Swordsman Fuling. He was one of the venerable swordsmen in Gujian sect. He entered the sect through Dao, so he always dressed like a secular Daoist, so they called him Old Daoist. Although they were all from the 7 great cultivation groups and would show some respect for each other because they were friends, it was hard to say when interests were at stake. At this time, another group of people also flew closer. Daoist Ji frowned even more. Qin Jinghe, Ding Luan and Feng Zhao looked at each other with a mysterious look in their eyes. Logically speaking, Qin Jinghe had a pretty good relationship with them, but the problem was that the reason they were fighting against Master Song Feng was because they wanted to fight over the treasure. With the treasure right in front of them, who knew whether or not they would try to snatch it by force? At this time, Feng Zhao secretly glanced at Qin Shi next to him, and Ding Luan nodded secretly. Feng Zhao suddenly moved and instantly flashed to Qin Shi's side. He said with a smile, Brat Qin, do us a favor. Although Qin Shi had been vigilant, Feng Zhao was a middle-stage nascent soul cultivator after all. He had just summoned the 3-yang real fire sword when Feng Zhao's palm hit his head. Chapter 294. Old Feng. With a loud shout, Lord Daoist Jinghe sped up and rushed to Feng Zhao in an instant. With the leaf fire gourd hanging in front of him, he shouted angrily, How dare you attack my disciple? Before Feng Zhao could speak, Ding Luan said with a smile, Brother Daoist Jinghe, don't worry. My husband was just joking with your boy. Joking? Lord Daoist Jinghe wasn't a slow-witted person. Looking at the scene in front of him, he roughly knew what happened, so his voice also slowed down. That'll do. You husband and wife don't need to play any tricks. Since you protected him this time, consider it as me owing you a favor. Hearing this, Feng Zhao laughed and pointed with 2 fingers. A stream of spiritual aura poured into Qin Shi's shoulder well acupoint. Qin Shi, whose meridians were restricted, finally recovered and breathed a sigh of relief. He bowed to Feng Zhao without any disrespect. Thank you, Senior Feng. Feng Zhao attacked him just now because he wanted to use him to restrain Lord Daoist Jinghe. Lord Daoist Jinghe was very tactful, so Feng Zhao and his wife chose to join hands with him. Qin Shi's mind was clear, so he was still respectful to Feng Zhao. There were many conflicts of interests between cultivators. Since his master chose to join hands with them, they were now companions, so he had no reason to be disrespectful to Feng Zhao. Feng Zhao nodded with a smile, but Ding Luan smiled sweetly at Lord Daoist Jinghe. Brother Daoist Jinghe, I really like your boy's cleverness. Why don't you become my son-in-law? Although my Fengning is a bit spoiled, she's also a good girl. In just a few seconds, from checks and balances to joining hands to discussing marriage, old Daoist Fuling and the others who were flying in front hadn't arrived yet, but their topic had already changed. Qin Shi turned a deaf ear to this and walked back to Lord Daoist Jinghe. Seeing that he was alone, Lord Daoist Jinghe looked around. Where's Tienge? Qin Shi was worried about this matter. I got separated from Tienge. Master, since you're here, I'll go find her. Wait. Lord Daoist Jinghe raised his hand to stop them. With a frown he said, Don't act rashly. This is the depths of Immortal's ruins. You shouldn't have come here. Since you're already here, just wait. Once I've dealt with the matter here, I'll go look for Tienge with you. But Qin Shi only said 2 words. When he saw Lord Daoist Jinghe's expression, He could only sigh and obey. Got it. Of course, he knew that his master was right. There were so many nascent soul cultivators here, so it was clear that he had gone in the wrong direction in the fog and entered the depths of Immortal's ruins by mistake. At this time, it was not suitable for him to act alone. But when he thought about how Tienge was still in the fog and couldn't find her way, he felt extremely anxious. Lord Daoist Jinghe naturally understood Qin Shi's absent-minded look, but he didn't say anything to him. Instead, he answered Ding Wan's question. It's too late. Your Fengning isn't bad, but unfortunately, my boy already has a sweetheart. Ding Wan was a little surprised. She glanced at Qin Shi and joked, what a pity. I wonder which family she's from? Good things don't flow to outsiders. Unfortunately, she's my disciple. Before Lord Daoist Jinghe could finish his complacent words, he heard a gloomy voice. The three of you are so impatient. It's only been a while, but you're already talking about marriage? This voice belonged to Master Song Feng. His own disciple was killed by Qin Shi. Now that he saw Lord Daoist Jinghe and the Wan and Feng couple talking about their disciple and daughter, he felt extremely resentful. Ding Wan added fuel to the fire. She said with a smile, Old Song Feng, you don't have a child. Are you jealous? If you have the time, you might as well give birth to a... Oh no, with your body that's neither human nor ghost nor monster, I'm afraid you can't give birth, right? Master Song Feng suddenly became furious. His primordial devil aura surged and transformed into a long knife. During this time, the other nascent soul cultivators landed one after another, staring at Master Song Feng with hostile expressions. Gujian Sect's Old Daoist Fuling, Sword Venerable Xiao He, Individual Cultivator Qingming Wanderer, Xianxing School's Lord Daoist Huayan, Tiandao Sect's Daoist Heifeng, Lu Dequan. Although these people were all in the early stage of the nascent soul realm except for Old Daoist Fuling, Lord Daoist Jinghe, Ding Wan, Feng Xiao, and Daoist Ji were all in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Master Song Feng paused for a while then snorted coldly. Without saying goodbye, he turned into a black cloud and left. The 10 nascent soul cultivators present all sighed with relief. They had a lot of people, so they weren't afraid of Master Song Feng, but this old man was a madman. If they really fought him, with his reputation as the #1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator in the Celestial Pole, even if they lost, they would lose a few people, and they probably wouldn't be able to kill him. Now that he left on his own, it couldn't be better. As soon as Master Song Feng left, Old Daoist Fuling, who had just arrived, greeted them with a smile. Fellow Daoist Feng, fellow Daoist Ding, fellow Daoist Ji, fellow Daoist Jinghe, what are you doing? During the demonic beast riot, Yi Jingwen and Gujian Sect had conflicts, so Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't have a good attitude towards Old Daoist Fuling. He just casually raised his hand at Old Daoist Fuling as a return greeting. Ding Wan smiled and said, Fellow Daoist Fuling, long time no see. In fact, it's nothing. Fellow Daoist Ji and I just found something. Really? Old Daoist Fuling's eyes glinted, but under the smiles of Ding Wan and Feng Xiao, the glint quickly dissipated. He was still smiling. Fellow Daoists, rest assured. You and your wife are working together, so how could I intervene? I just want to broaden my horizons. You won't object, right? Ding Wan smiled and said slowly, What are you talking about, fellow Daoist Fuling? It's not a good thing. It's just a piece of Xian Fire Jade essence. I think it's useless to you. Oh. The light in Old Daoist Fuling's eyes went out. Xian Fire Jade essence was a good thing and a rare material for refining fire magic weapons, but he was a sword cultivator, so it was useless to him. On the contrary, Qin Shi next to Lord Daoist Jinghe brightened his eyes. As a middle-stage nascent soul cultivator, Ding Wan's eyes immediately fell on Qin Shi and she asked with a smile, Qin boy, are you interested in the Xian Fire Jade essence? Oh, that's right. Both of you, master and disciple, practice fire magic. Although her words were kind, Ding Wan glanced at Lord Daoist Jinghe faintly, and her meaning was self-evident. Lord Daoist Jinghe snorted and said, You two don't need to test me. When have I ever gone back on my words? There were many intrigues among cultivators, but the higher the level of a cultivator, the more importance they attached to their promises. Once they made a promise, they generally wouldn't go back on it unless it involved great benefits. A piece of Xian Fire Jade essence met this standard, so Ding Wan and Feng Xiao both wanted to test Lord Daoist Jinghe. However, they also knew that although Qin Jinghe was annoying, he always kept his word. It was fine if he didn't know about the Xian Fire Jade essence, but he still said that after knowing it, so he certainly wouldn't compete with them. Among the 5 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators present, old Daoist Fuling wasn't interested, Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't compete, and they were on the same side as Daoist Ji, so they naturally didn't pose any threat. Feng Xiao bowed to the others. "Thank you, everyone." Then he winked at Daoist Ji. Daoist Ji nodded and jumped down from the crater. Daoist Ji went to get the Xian Fire Jade essence. Ding Wan looked around and saw a handsome young man in the foundation building realm behind old Daoist Fuling, so she asked with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Fuling, when did you accept a new disciple?" Old Daoist Fuling glanced at the young man behind him, stroked his beard, and said with a smile, "This little friend is not my disciple." "Really?" Ding Wan was a little surprised. "When did you become so kind? If he's not your disciple, why did you bring him to Demonic Mountain?" "Ha!" Old Daoist Fuling seemed to be in a good mood. "It doesn't hurt to tell you, but fellow Daoist Ding, you and your wife can't compete with me." Feng Xiao smiled. "What are you talking about, fellow Daoist Fuling? We already have a daughter." "Do you think we'll take this little friend as our son-in-law?" "That's hard to say." Old Daoist Fuling smiled mysteriously. His expression was too mysterious, so the Wan and Feng couple, as well as Lord Daoist Jinghe and the others, couldn't help but release their divine senses to explore the young man. As soon as they did, their expressions changed. After a long time, Ding Wan murmured, "Pure Yang Constitution." Upon hearing these words, Qin Shi's expression suddenly changed, and he couldn't help but look at the young man. Old Daoist Fuling smiled without saying anything, obviously very proud. He wasn't worried that others would compete with him. After all, pure Yang Constitution was only useful for female cultivators. Ding Wan was the only female cultivator present, and she already had a dual cultivation partner. Although they had a daughter, they loved her like a treasure, so they wouldn't casually find a human furnace for their daughter. Even if other people had female disciples, they had to think about the consequences of competing with him. A moment later, Feng Xiao said faintly, "Fellow Daoist Fuling, you're really lucky. Pure Yang Constitution is hard to find in 1,000 years. Are you going to give him to your disciple as a human furnace?" Hearing the word human furnace, the young man was even more frightened. Old Daoist Fuling said with a smile, "He's not a human furnace. This little friend has a good aptitude, so it's not a big deal to take him as a disciple." "Really?" Ding Wan wanted to say more, but Daoist Ji had already appeared at the crater, so she stopped talking. Daoist Ji glanced cautiously at the nascent soul cultivators in front of him and then gently threw the Xian Fire Jade essence in his hand. Although the nascent soul cultivators had no intention of snatching it, they didn't leave. Naturally, they were interested in the Xian Fire Jade essence. They wanted to see what the Xian Fire Jade essence that grew in Immortal's ruins looked like. At this moment, when they saw the Xian Fire Jade essence that Daoist Ji threw out, their eyes were fixed on it. Old Daoist Fuling's eyes flashed, and even Lord Daoist Jinghe was a bit tempted. This Xian Fire Jade essence was really too perfect. It was as big as 2 palms, fiery red, crystal clear, and extremely pure. They had never seen such a Xian Fire Jade essence. "Seniors." Qin Shi was the first to speak. The Wan and Feng couple and Daoist Ji stared at him vigilantly. Qin Shi said calmly, "Seniors, are you only interested in the Xian Fire Jade essence?" The 3 of them were stunned, but Ding Wan still said with a smile, "Brat Qin, what do you mean?" Qin Shi said, "Such a large piece of jade essence must have grown here for at least tens of thousands of years, so it's enough to grow a chalcedony. If there's a chalcedony, would you be willing to part with it? I'm willing to exchange it with other treasures." "Chalcedony?" Lord Daoist Jinghe was moved, and his eyes were a bit eager. Yes, this jade essence looks so good. If it grows a chalcedony, it must be good. The three middle-stage nascent soul cultivators looked at each other. Chalcedony was rare, but it was nothing compared to this Xian fire jade essence. Ding Wan said, "So you want a chalcedony? If there's a chalcedony in this jade essence, I don't mind giving it to you." Xianxia smiled and bowed to thank them. "Thank you, seniors." A trace of regret flashed in the eyes of old Daoist Fuling and the others. Now that they found the Xian fire jade essence was so outstanding, they were all greedy. If Qin Jinghe's group had a conflict with these three people, they could fish in troubled waters. Unfortunately, this Qin brat wanted a chalcedony, and Ding Wan gave him a favor, so it seemed they wouldn't fight. Thinking of this, old Daoist Fuling bowed to the others. "Since there's nothing else, we'll take our leave first. Fellow Daoists, I hope to see you again." Ding Wan and Feng Xiao were eager for them to leave, so they politely bowed back, but Lord Daoist Jinghe's group didn't pay any attention to them. Chapter 295. After old Daoist Fuling left, Feng Xiao took the Xian fire jade essence, pressed it with his fingers, explored it with his spiritual aura, and said with a smile, "Brat Qin, you're lucky. There's really a chalcedony in this jade essence." "Really?" A happy expression appeared on Xianxi's face. Feng Xiao exerted force on his fingers, and a crack appeared on the Xian fire jade essence. Water-like clear jade liquid flowed out and condensed into a transparent crystal as soon as it came into contact with the air. When the jade liquid flowed out, Feng Xiao threw the crystal in his palm to Xianxia. "My wife said this chalcedony is for you." With such a pure color, this chalcedony was definitely more than 1,000 years old. Xianxia took it and cupped his fists in delight. "Thank you, seniors. I'll remember your kindness." Ding Wan smiled. "You're not going to marry my Fengning. Why do you need to remember?" Although Xianxia was experienced, he was a bit thin-skinned, so he just smiled and didn't answer Ding Wan's teasing. Lord Daoist Jinghe glanced at them and said, "You and your wife shouldn't bully my disciple. If there's nothing else, we'll leave." Although Lord Daoist Jinghe had said he wouldn't intervene, there were 4 nascent soul cultivators here, which added variables. The Luan and Feng couple and Daoist Ji were eager for him to leave, so no one was polite. Feng Xiao said, "In that case, I'll see you later." Lord Daoist Jinghe nodded and left with Xianxia, Lord Daoist Huayan, Daoist Haifeng and the others. After flying out of the range of the 3 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators' divine senses, the group of 5 stopped, and Lord Daoist Jinghe asked, "Where did Tiange go missing?" Xianxia pointed in a direction. "That way, about half a day's journey." Lord Daoist Jinghe looked at the direction he pointed and frowned. "You mean in the fog?" "Yes." "How long have you been separated? Was there anyone else with you? Does Tiange have any injuries? What happened? Tell me slowly." Lord Daoist Jinghe asked questions one by one. Xianxia suppressed his anxiety and roughly described their situation in the past few days. Of course, he skipped the part that was inconvenient to say in public. When he talked about how they were separated, Lord Daoist Jinghe and the 3 nascent soul cultivators exchanged glances. The black-robed Daoist Haifeng, who looked like a demonic cultivator, said, "Qin family's kid, this is the first time we've encountered the fog you mentioned. Previously, we spent quite a bit of effort to get out. We really don't have much confidence in searching there." This answer surprised Xianxia. He looked at Lord Daoist. Lord Daoist Jinghe said, "A cultivator who's just formed his gold core won't survive more than a few days in Immortal's ruins if he doesn't have any special means. Tiange is my disciple, I can't just leave her there alone." Daoist Daoist Dan Didden, Daoist Lu Dequan and Lu Didden Daoist was my, she and Didden's. Qin, Master Jinghe, Daoist. Daoist sect. Fire and the Daoist. And Daoist. Daoist Feng and Lu Daoist Lu. De, Qin, Yang, Dao, Master. Luin. Daoist Jinghe said faintly, "Got it. Junior Martial Brother Huayan and I will be there in 2 days. If we don't arrive, you don't have to wait for us." Daoist Haifeng and Lu Dequan looked at each other, nodded, and left in flight lights. When they disappeared, Lord Daoist Huayan, who had been silent, asked, "Senior Martial Brother Jinghe, how are we going to find her?" This problem gave Lord Daoist Jinghe a headache. They had all been through the fog and knew divine senses were useless in that place. Even though they were nascent soul cultivators, they had to be very careful. "Brat." Lord Daoist Jinghe pointed at Xianxia. "Aren't you usually very capable? How could this happen when you took Tiange out?" Xianxia lowered his head and didn't say anything. He was indeed not cautious enough. He knew Immortal's ruins was full of danger, but he didn't prevent them from getting separated. Seeing him like this, Lord Daoist Jinghe felt he couldn't be blamed, so he said, "There's no other way. Let's go find her. Junior Martial Brother Huayan, let's split up. You go to the east and I'll go to the west. We'll meet here in a day and a half whether we find her or not." Lord Daoist Huayan didn't say any nonsense. He directly dived down, turned into a flight light, and disappeared into the fog not far away. Watching Lord Daoist Huayan's figure disappear, Lord Daoist Jinghe stood for a while and suddenly said, "Tell me, did something happen between you and Tiange?" Xianxia was stunned. Realizing what his master was asking about, he coughed and looked away. "Let's talk about it later." Seeing him like this, Lord Daoist Jinghe was greatly surprised. "Brat, did you succeed?" Xianxia didn't answer, but even a blind man could see the joy in his eyes. Lord Daoist Jinghe wanted to laugh, but he felt unhappy because he didn't see it. His expression twisted for a while, but he had to pat Xianxia's shoulder. "Not bad. You didn't waste Master's kindness." Xianxia was happy to think of this, but he was more worried about Tiange's safety. He said, "Master, let's go find her first. If we're late, Tiange will be in more danger." Tiange was indeed in danger now. In the fog, a large group of gold wire rats appeared out of nowhere. Although their cultivation levels weren't high, there were a lot of them, and they appeared and disappeared unpredictably in the fog. Shi and Jingxingji had been killing for a long time, but they still hadn't killed all of them. Tiange swallowed several regeneration pills and watched Xiaohua jumping up and down to force the demonic beasts to retreat with spells. She gasped and said, "Fellow Daoist Jing, we can't go on like this." Jingxingji, who was controlling his flying sword to kill the enemies, rolled his eyes. "I know that, but do you have a way?" Tiange thought for a while and said, "There's a way we can try. Even if it doesn't work, we can still take a break." The two of them had been killing for a long time without stopping. Although Jingxingji still had spiritual aura in his body, he felt mentally exhausted, so he said, "That's not bad. Tell me what you want to do." Tiange killed another group of demonic beasts and said, "Fellow Daoist, you can block these demonic beasts for a while." Jingxingji didn't say anything. The long sword in his hand suddenly burst with bright white light, enveloping the two people and the demonic beast. Although this person's character wasn't likable, there was no doubt about his strength. Under the sword light, none of the demonic beasts could cross the boundary. Tiange didn't waste any time. She touched her Qianquan bag, took out formation-laying tools and spirit stones, and quickly laid a formation around the two of them. Jingxingji glanced at her, feeling a bit surprised. The Tao of formations could be considered the most unorthodox of the unorthodox methods. Studying formations required a lot of time, and before reaching the nascent soul realm, every cultivator hated the fact that they had too little time to cultivate. They simply couldn't spend too much time studying unorthodox methods, so there were very few cultivators below the nascent soul realm who were proficient in formations. However, he didn't know that Tiange's situation was a bit special. When she was building her foundation, she was worried that her cultivation speed would be too fast, so she deliberately slowed down and spent a lot of time studying unorthodox methods, so her formations were much better than cultivators in the same realm as her. The formation in her hands now was the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation she modified. The 4 symbols were mainly for defense, while the 100 flowers were mainly for killing. It was a compound formation. However, it hadn't been long since she formed her gold core, so she didn't spend much time on formations. This set of formation-laying tools was prepared for her when she was building her foundation, so its power was limited. Just as she was laying the formation, Jing Xingji suddenly shouted, "Someone's coming!" Imo was startled, then delighted. She hurriedly asked, "What's his cultivation level?" Her divine sense was injured, so it was even weaker than Jing Xingji's. The fog also blocked divine senses, so Jing Xingji sensed for a long time before he said with uncertainty, "He seems to be in the core formation realm." Core formation realm? Could it be? Before he could finish his words, a vague black-clothed figure appeared in the fog. As soon as this person appeared, the surrounding gold wire rats found a new target, and several hundred of them immediately turned around and rushed towards this person. Seeing this, Imo stopped laying the formation. She and Jing Xingji glanced at each other and each controlled the flying swords in their hands to kill that person. "Fellow Daoist," Jing Xingji said loudly, "I'm a cultivator from Gujin sect. May I ask your name?" In the fog, the black figure heard his voice and paused for a moment, but it didn't answer and continued to focus on killing. Imo squinted her eyes and asked hesitantly, "Look, isn't that a female cultivator?" Although the fog was hazy, the figure in black that appeared faintly was indeed graceful. Jing Xingji only took a glance then said, "It's a female cultivator." Hearing his affirmative answer, Imo was secretly disappointed. Although she knew Qin Shi's cultivation level and methods were higher than hers and he was also very experienced, this was demonic mountain. She felt very uneasy after being separated from him for so long. "What should we do now?" Jing Xingji glanced around and said, "Let's go and take a look. The more people, the more assurance." Imo had no objection. As for female cultivators, few of them were ruthless, and the other party was also trapped in the same fog, so they should be able to form an alliance. The two of them manipulated their flying swords. Xiaohua spewed sun real fire and attacked the direction of the black-clothed woman. The two of them were getting closer and closer, and they could clearly see the woman's appearance. She wore claw gloves and was fighting with demonic beasts. Unexpectedly, she was a martial cultivator. Jing Xingji's voice was filled with excitement. "She's a beauty." Imo couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. This guy really changed. What kind of situation is this? He's still thinking about the other party being a beauty. Although she said that, Imo was still a bit curious. She looked at the woman's face, and what she saw stunned her. She had a very delicate face. It wasn't very beautiful, but it had a kind of calm and cold beauty. Of course, this wasn't the reason she was surprised. What she found strange was that she looked a bit familiar. A delicate woman, a martial cultivator, using claw gloves. Cultivators always had good memories. Imo slowly recalled such a person. She knew who this person was. She took a breath and said secretly, "Fellow Daoist Jing, this person is related to Master Song Feng." Jing Xingji paused and looked at her suspiciously. There was no one in Kunwu who didn't know about Master Song Feng. Jing Xingji naturally also knew about the Celestial Pole's #1 late nascent soul cultivator and his disreputable reputation. He said secretly, "Do you know her?" "I've seen her once." Imo stared at the female cultivator without blinking. Yes, more than 50 years ago, the female cultivator who appeared in Lord Daoist Xuanin's nascent soul ceremony and fought with her was this woman. Chapter 296. At Lord Daoist Xuanin's nascent soul ceremony, this woman was still in the late stage of the foundation building realm. After Master Song Feng appeared, she inexplicably disappeared. Imo didn't know what technique she used. Imo didn't expect to see her again more than 50 years later, and she had also advanced to the core formation realm. This wasn't strange. At that time, this woman was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm. If she was really Master Song Feng's disciple or grand disciple, it was normal for her to advance to the early stage of the core formation realm in 50 years. Imo herself was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at that time, but now she had also advanced to the core formation realm. She roughly told Jing Xingji what happened. Jing Xingji paused but didn't say anything. Although he liked beauties, his heart was ruthless. In comparison, he was even more ruthless than Xianxia. At least, if Xianxia promised to take someone with him, he wouldn't talk nonsense. Xingji, on the other hand, kept fawning on her along the way but never truly regarded her as a partner. However, this woman was a core formation cultivator after all. In this situation, one more person was always good. Tiange didn't know what decision Xingji would make. Tiange turned to look at the woman and found that her martial arts skills were much better than they were 50 years ago. Martial cultivators were the same as sword cultivators. They had to surpass ordinary cultivators in fights of magical power. The higher the cultivation level, the more terrifying this advantage was. Although this woman was only in the early stage of the core formation realm, judging from the power of her attacks, she wasn't weaker than ordinary middle-stage core formation cultivators, maybe even stronger. Tiange's heart was also in turmoil. If she joined hands with this woman, she'd be a good help, but if she turned against her, in this fog, there were really dangers everywhere. After a while, Xingji finally said via voice transmission, "If we can join hands with her, then let's do it." Tiange nodded. In any case, she chose to believe Xingji at this time. "Miss," Xingji said loudly, "I'm a cultivator from Gujin sect. May I ask if you're Master Song Feng's disciple?" As soon as he said that, the black-clothed figure paused, turned around, and glanced at the two of them warily. Xingji smiled and said to her, "Miss, don't worry. We don't have any bad intentions. This fog is really strange. You and I are trapped here, so are you willing to join hands?" The woman stared at them for a while, but didn't say anything. Xingji continued, "There are dangers everywhere on Demonic Mountain. Although Miss is skilled and bold, you're riding alone in the end. Having an extra helper also means having an extra escape route." When he said that, Xingji's expression was very sincere. The woman looked at him, then at Tiange, who was resisting the gold wire rat's attacks behind him. Her vigilant expression slowly softened. Before she opened her mouth, she said in a low, hoarse voice, "What if we join hands?" Hearing this, Xingji smiled and said, "Naturally, we'll join hands to protect ourselves and find a way out." "Looking for a way out?" The woman's lips curled into a smile, but it looked like she was mocking them. "Have you found a way out?" "No," Xingji said frankly. "However, the three of us are safer than one." Tiange had to admit that when Xingji's expression was serious, he was indeed a bit charming. Under his gaze, this woman gradually became less callous. She said, "How can I trust you?" Xingji said with a smile, "What's the benefit of killing you in this fog? Besides, since you can reach Immortal's ruins, you must have extraordinary skills. Even if you fall out with us, you must have a way to escape, right?" After he said that, the woman was lost in thought. In a flash, a group of gold wire rats in front of her suddenly attacked. With a flash of sword light, Xingji's flying sword was like a waterfall. Wherever the sword light went, flesh and blood flew everywhere. The group of gold wire rats died on the spot. After the death of this group of gold wire rats, the other gold wire rats that besieged them also attacked. The three of them didn't dare to neglect and immediately worked together to kill these violent demonic beasts. Originally, Xingji and Tiange didn't have enough lethality because Tiange didn't have a suitable magic weapon. However, this woman was a martial cultivator, so she killed demonic beasts much faster than ordinary cultivators. With the three of them working together, the number of gold wire rats gradually decreased. More than an hour later, all the gold wire rats were finally killed. The three of them working together to kill the demonic beasts was, in fact, an alliance. After killing, the three of them were so tired that Tiange couldn't even stand steadily. Xiaohua simply lay down and stuck out his tongue. The three of them sat on the ground in different postures, gasping for breath. After a while, they finally got their breath. Xingji smiled at the woman and said, "Miss, may I know your name?" A hint of hesitation flashed in the woman's eyes and she answered, "Nia Wushang." Xingji was stunned. "Wushang? Charming Wushang? Nikang Wushang?" Her expression was cold and emotionless. "It's called nothing and it's called Wushang." Jing Xingji had never heard such a name in his life, so he didn't know what to say for a moment. Wuxiang. This really didn't sound like a woman's name. After a long time, he could only praise, what a special name. The woman who called herself Nie Wuxiang showed a mocking smile on her face and didn't answer. I'm Jing Xingji. Upon hearing Jing Xingji's self-introduction, Nie Wuxiang just nodded, then turned to Mo Tiange and said, Fellow Daoist Mo, long time no see. Do you still remember me? Mo Tiange nodded. She was neither affectionate nor distant, and she replied with the same indifference, Of course I remember. Unfortunately, I didn't know fellow Daoist's name until today. Cultivators always had good memories, so it wasn't surprising that they remembered each other. However, Mo Tiange still had doubts in her heart. Back then, this woman was no different from ordinary cultivators, but today she had been using ventriloquism and her voice was also quite strange. From beginning to end, she hadn't opened her mouth to speak. Could it be that something had changed in the past 50 years? However, they originally didn't have any friendship. They could even be said to be enemies. Mo Tiange only thought about it in her heart and didn't ask. After a few simple words, the three of them staggered to recover their spiritual aura. After a while, Jing Xingji finished meditating and asked Nie Wuxiang, Miss Nie, how long have you been here? Do you have any clues about how to get out? Nie Wuxiang answered, About a day. My divine sense is useless here, and I've lost all sense of direction. I haven't been able to find a way out. Her situation was similar to theirs. Jing Xingji turned to look at Mo Tiange and said, We're the same. However, along the way, fellow Daoist Qingwei left a formation imprint. I wonder if you've noticed it? Were you the ones who drew that 8 trigrams formation? Nie Wuxiang frowned. Mo Tiange answered, Yes. In that case, fellow Daoist Nie has encountered it along the way? Nie Wuxiang nodded. I've encountered it a few times. Unfortunately, I'm not very proficient in formations, so I don't know how to point to it. A few times? We've been following the directions of the 8 trigrams formation. If fellow Daoist has encountered it several times, it means fellow Daoist has gone around several times. I see. Nie Wuxiang was stunned. She then asked in a low voice, So, fellow Daoists still have a way to get out? Mo Tiange's expression was indifferent. I'm not sure about that. Nobody knows how big this fog is, and we don't know whether our direction is correct. In this fog, even our divine senses can make mistakes, and formation diagrams aren't completely reliable. What she said wasn't false. Formation diagrams could only point to the direction, but they couldn't point to the correct path. Moreover, since this fog could affect divine senses, could it also affect other judgments? They didn't know. The three of them were silent for a while. Jing Xingji said, Young missus, have you recovered your spiritual aura? I've recovered. With a small circulation inside her body, Mo Tiange recovered her spiritual aura very quickly. Nie Wuxiang also nodded. Jing Xingji said, Then, what do you think about the rest of our journey? Mo Tiange didn't answer immediately. She turned to look at Nie Wuxiang. Nie Wuxiang lowered her head and also didn't answer. After a moment of silence, Jing Xingji said, Ladies, this is related to our lives. If you have something to say, you'd better say it now. Right now, he didn't have a smile on his face. Instead, he looked at them seriously. I have nothing to say. Mo Tiange was the first to speak. She said faintly, To be frank, my strength is inferior to yours. I only know a little about formations, that's all. Using formation diagrams to point out the direction is the only way I can think of. Jing Xingji and Nie Wuxiang didn't answer. After a moment of silence, Nie Wuxiang's low and hoarse voice rang out. Fellow Daoist, you have this 5th-rank spiritual beast, so your strength isn't weak. You're being too modest. Mo Tiange smiled. I'm just speaking the truth. Spiritual beasts are too weak compared to cultivators. But fellow Daoist's magic weapon is also extraordinary. Nie Wuxiang raised her eyebrows and smiled. Her smile didn't seem to be a simple one. The previous few times, it was always filled with ridicule, but this time, it had a different meaning. Mo Tiange pretended she didn't see anything and smiled slightly. Fellow Daoist Nye, you flatter me. Nye Wuxiang continued. Fellow Daoist Mo, I heard your master and senior martial brother both came to Demonic Mountain? But why are you alone? Mo Tiange glanced at her then said flatly, they have another purpose. Is that so? Nye Wuxiang smiled again. This time, her smile finally had a charming feeling, but it seemed a bit gloomy. Fellow Daoist you can't contact them, right? Mo Tiange didn't move, but Jing Xingji's sword was unsheathed with a swish. The sword light approached Nye Wuxiang. Nye Wuxiang, however, didn't move. She raised her head and smiled at Jing Xingji. Fellow Daoist Jing, what are you doing? You have nothing to do with Xianxia school, right? Jing Xingji's gaze was as cold as ice. He said coldly, I have even less to do with Master Song Feng. Nye Wuxiang still ignored the motionless flying sword hovering in front of her. She said, I heard fellow Daoist Mo already has a Daoist name now. When I first met you several decades ago, I really didn't expect this day would come so quickly. Fellow Daoist is worthy of being Lord Daoist Jinghe's brilliant disciple. Mo Tiange sat still and replied, Fellow Daoist Nye, you flatter me. To be honest, Nye Wuxiang stared at Mo Tiange, her expression gradually turning cold. I'm not jealous of fellow Daoist Mo's talent, but I'm extremely jealous of fellow Daoist Mo's experiences. A disciple of a famous school, a nascent soul master, and he loves his disciple as much as his own life. Fellow Daoist's life is really good. By the end of her speech, Nye Wuxiang was no longer looking at Mo Tiange. Instead, she was smiling a bit absent-mindedly. Jing Xingji's expression changed. The sword light flashed and he withdrew. Fellow Daoist Nye, what do you mean by saying all this? Chapter 297. Nothing. Nye Wuxiang stood up, pulled on her gloves, and said expressionlessly, I'm not like fellow Daoism. Aside from brute force, I have no other strong points. I'll listen to you two fellow Daoists on how to get out. After a while, Jing Xingji sheathed his sword and sat back down. I have an idea, but I don't know if fellow Daoists are willing to give it a try. Mo Tiange and Nye Wuxiang immediately turned to him. Jing Xingji said, it's easy to say, but there's a certain risk. Mo Tiange said, we were just lucky to be trapped here. If we encounter any troublesome demonic beasts, how good can we be? If fellow Daoist Jing has an idea, you might as well tell us. Nye Wuxiang also nodded expressionlessly and didn't object. Jing Xingji smiled and pointed above. Since we can't tell the direction, we might as well fly up. There's always an end to this fog, right? Both Mo Tiange and Nye Wuxiang were stunned. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment then said, but fellow Daoist Jing, there's immortal aura above Immortal's ruins. We don't have Immortal's bodies, so we can't stand immortal aura at all. What if we run into it? Jing Xingji said, this is the risk I'm talking about. This immortal aura shouldn't exist in the human world, so immortal aura has a repulsive effect on many things. This fog must be the same. I'm sure there's a gap between the fog and immortal aura. If we're lucky, we can leave through this gap. Mo Tiange and Nye Wuxiang were lost in thought. They ruled out this method from the beginning because there was immortal aura above Immortal's ruins. The powerful power in immortal aura was quite terrifying for cultivators like them. But Jing Xingji's words weren't unreasonable. They didn't know how long they could stay trapped in the fog like this. The group of gold wire rats just now were all below the 5th rank, but they were already so difficult to deal with. What if they encountered demonic beasts above the 5th rank? They might as well try their luck. Maybe they could really get out. Okay. Mo Tiange made up her mind. I think fellow Daoist Jing's idea is feasible. Nye Wuxiang also nodded. Her hoarse voice rang out. Fellow Daoists, are the seniors of your sect nearby? Mo Tiange and Jing Xingji looked at each other, and Jing Xingji said, fellow Daoist Nye, do you mean sending a message? That's right. Nye Wuxiang shifted her gaze between the two of them and said, of course, the two of you can also refuse. Perhaps the one who comes first will be my master at that time. Emo Tienga's eyes flickered, but she didn't say anything. From what Nie Wuxiang said, it seemed she was really Master Song Feng's disciple. Moreover, Master Song Feng also came to Demonic Mountain. This wasn't good news. Although Master Song Feng wasn't a good person, there was no doubt that he was strong. Furthermore, he had old grudges against both Lord Daoist Jinghe and Qin Shi. Qin Shi was in this. Not to Daoist Jingji Shen, Qin Master, and in Daoist Mo Asheng. With this thought in mind, Mo Tienga glanced at Jing Xingji. Wang, Nye from. Wang, Wu from. Forget it. We don't have many thousand miles summoning talismans. Let's talk about it after we're sure we can get out. Mo Tienga was relieved. She was really worried Master Song Feng would come. The three of them did as they said. First of all, they had to find a suitable place to fly up. Core formation cultivators could fly high in the sky, but the fog here was unclear, so they had to be careful. Second, they had to prepare defensive magic weapons and talismans for emergencies. Finally, the three of them were in trouble together, but they weren't of one mind, so they had to guard against others. Mo Tienga didn't dare to trust either of them. Nie Wuxiang was Master Song Feng's disciple, and Jing Xingji was ruthless. She couldn't trust either of them. She was the weakest among the three, so they had to be careful. After a while, the three of them finally found a suitable place to fly up. This should also be a relic of the fight between immortals and demons in the distant past era. The neat rocks were cut off, exposing the horrible greenish-gray inside. After millions of years of weathering, they no longer had sharp edges, but they still retained their strange appearance. Jing Xingji flew several dozen feet up to check the situation. He then came down and said, "Let's do it here. It doesn't look abnormal." Mo Tienga also went up to take a look. Seeing nothing abnormal, she nodded in agreement. Nie Wuxiang, on the other hand, looked casual and didn't look at it carefully. The three of them then sat in meditation and rested, preparing magic weapons, talismans, and the like. After a long time, Jing Xingji asked, "Fellow Daoists, are you ready?" If he had the intention of seducing someone, he'd call them Miss. Now that he called them fellow Daoists, it was clear he'd changed his mind. Mo Tienga and Nie Wuxiang both nodded. Nie Wuxiang was a martial cultivator, so she didn't have much to prepare. Mo Tienga, on the other hand, had always been cautious and put her things in the most convenient places. That being the case, let's get started. Wait! Nie Wuxiang's voice rang out. The three of us go up together? Wouldn't it be more convenient to leave one person outside? Jing Xingji smiled. Among the three of us, who's more reassuring to stay down there? Nie Wuxiang and Mo Tienga were speechless. Indeed, the three of them didn't trust each other, so staying behind to look after each other was unnecessary. If something really happened up there, they could only blame it on their bad luck. The three of them silently took out their flying magic weapons, operated their protective spiritual aura, and began to fly up. This process was very slow, very similar to the situation when they climbed tens of thousands of feet peak before. However, it was very likely that they would encounter immortal aura instead of devil aura, so they also had to carefully avoid it or use their protective spiritual aura to block it. The three of them flew higher and higher, getting farther and farther away from the ground. Mo Tienga looked down. She didn't know why, but she felt a bit restless. She was now a core formation cultivator, so her perception of the mandate of heaven was much stronger than before. This was indeed not a good sign. She looked at Jing Xingji and found that he was also looking at her with a frown. Her heart stirred. Just as she was about to ask him in secret, she suddenly felt her ankle being pulled down by someone. She didn't have time to think too much. Her flying sword flew out of her sleeve and flew close to her ankle. At the same time, she looked down. With a single glance, he was astonished. She originally thought it was one of the two people who sneak attacked her, but she didn't expect it to be a hand that stretched out from the rock wall. Mo Tienga had wandered in the cultivation world for many years, but this was the first time she encountered such a strange scene. She felt her scalp go numb, and she was so shocked that she almost cut off her foot. In a flash, Jing Xingji grabbed her hand and slashed down with his flying sword. His flying sword was an ancient magic weapon that could be called the same as Qin Shi's 3-yang real fire sword. With one slash, that rock hand was cut off. After being cut off, those rocks seemed to have lost their vitality and fell one after another. Tiange didn't have time to breathe a sigh of relief. On the other side, Nie Wuxiang let out a soft cry and was also entangled by these rock hands. Immediately afterward, countless rock hands stretched out from the cliff they were facing and tried to grab them. The three of them fought with these rock hands. Jing Xingji was fine. His flying sword was very sharp, so these rocks couldn't withstand his slash. Nie Wuxiang was slightly more difficult to deal with. Her boxing gloves were covered with spikes. If it was something else, it wouldn't be able to withstand a single punch from her. However, these rocks weren't afraid of spikes at all, so she had to use more strength than usual to smash these rocks. Tiange's situation was similar to Nie Wuxiang's. She didn't have many offensive magic weapons on her, and the water element jade bottle and the earth element stone seal weren't suitable for the current situation. Her remaining flying sword wasn't as good as Jing Xingji's, so it was very strenuous for her to slash them. Tiange found that using the flying sword consumed her spiritual aura very quickly, so she quickly stopped. She released Xiaohua from her spiritual beast bag and let it stand on her shoulder. She then used the sun real fire to burn these rock hands, which finally made things a bit easier. After fighting for a while, the three of them finally escaped from the rock hands. They flew some distance away before they stopped and didn't dare to approach again. The three of them looked at each other, then Tiange asked, "Fellow Daoists, what is this thing?" Nie Wuxiang shook her head with a pale face. Although she wasn't weak, these strange rocks were extremely hard, which happened to restrain her. Right now, she was fighting a bit awkwardly. "I've never encountered such a strange thing. How can rocks be like living things?" Jing Xingji waved his hand, surrounding himself with sword lights. He said, "I also don't know. However, it's not surprising that there are strange things on Demonic Mountain." That was true. The world was so big that nothing was too strange, let alone a strange place like Demonic Mountain. The environment here was different from the human world. Perhaps the rules of the human world simply didn't apply here. The three of them were silent for a while. In the end, Nie Wuxiang said, "Forget it. It's not the time to look into this. Since we've already flown here, let's continue." Tiange nodded in agreement. "I have no objection. What about fellow Daoist Jing?" Jing Xingji answered. Compared to them, he was the most relaxed. Although he had been fighting for a while, he almost didn't lose any spiritual aura. After being attacked by the rock hands, the three of them became even more cautious. Flying high in the sky full of gales, restrictions, and immortal aura wasn't safe. After flying for a while, they reached the end of the cliff they climbed. Tiange took a look and found that there were a lot of pink ball-like flowers growing on the hilltop, which looked very familiar. After looking for a while, she suddenly let out a cry of surprise and pointed at those pink ball-like flowers. "Fellow Daoists, look. Are those the heavenly fragrant flowers that grow heavenly aromatic beans?" Nie Wuxiang only glanced at them, then looked away with disinterest. "I'm not proficient in spiritual plants, so I can't recognize them." Jing Xingji looked at her with a somewhat strange expression, then nodded. "Probably. Heavenly aromatic herbs aren't very rare on Demonic Mountain. I once heard people talk about them, and they indeed look very similar." Upon hearing his affirmation, Tiange hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still gave up. Forget it. She absolutely didn't dare to take any more risks after what happened just now. At worst, she'd just buy some heavenly aromatic beans when they got out. Chapter 298. As the three of them flew up, the fog became thinner and the immortal aura got closer and closer. Seeing that the immortal aura formed by the fallen immortals was right in front of them, the three of them couldn't help but stop. At that moment, even Jing Xingji looked hesitant. They guessed that there was a gap between the immortal aura and the fog. Now, the immortal aura was right in front of them, but the fog hadn't reached its end. No one knew whether they would explode because of touching the immortal aura if they flew up again. What should they do next? Fellow Daoist Jing. Before Imo could finish speaking, Jing Xingji flew up again. Imo and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other and eventually followed him. The fog became thinner and thinner, and the immortal aura around them also became more and more abundant. The three of them had to spend more time blocking the immortal aura. This process was very complicated. They constantly consumed and replenished their spiritual aura. Imo occasionally looked down and saw that the mountain below had become a smalled. After a long time, she heard Jing Xingji call out in surprise, "Fellow Daoists, look." Imo looked up and saw that above the thin fog, there was a light without any obstruction. They finally rushed out of the fog. The three of them felt like they were reborn. They were trapped in the fog for just over a day, but the feeling that they couldn't get rid of the fog no matter where they went made them feel like it was a long time. After a moment of silence, Jing Xingji said, "Fellow Daoists, we're out of the fog. The most dangerous moment is below us. Don't lower your guard." Imo and Nie Wuxiang regained their senses and nodded. They both had quiet personalities, which was something Jing Xingji was very glad about. He liked women, but he hated others who held him back when he was in danger. Fortunately, these two didn't have bad tempers. The immortal aura was very close to them, so they had to be very careful every time they flew. Fortunately, they were out of the fog and could clearly distinguish the direction. 10,000 feet peak was to their south, but there was a big volcano to their north, so they chose the west as their escape route. About half a day later, the three of them got out of the fog without danger and descended to the ground. Imo finally breathed a sigh of relief. She was always on edge when she was with these two, but now it was finally over. Fellow Daoists. As soon as she landed, Nie Wuxiang's gaze rested on the two of them for a moment before she said, "Since we're out of the fog, I'll take my leave now." Jing Xingji smiled and said, "Why is fellow Daoist Nie in such a hurry? Although we're out of the fog, this is the Immortal's ruins. There are still dangers everywhere." The corners of Nie Wuxiang's mouth curled up, revealing a somewhat mocking smile. "Fellow Daoist Jing, just take it that I'm a coward. If I'm not careful and run into your masters, I don't want this life of mine." After she finished speaking, she activated her flying magic weapon, turned around, and left without saying anything. Imo stared at her back and sighed inwardly. Putting aside the fact that she was Master Songfang's disciple, Nie Wuxiang wasn't annoying. Unfortunately, she was still Master Songfang's disciple. After a moment of silence, Jing Xingji said, "Let's go." However, Imo didn't move. When Jing Xingji turned around, she said, "Fellow Daoist Jing, I still have to find senior martial brother Shoujing. May I know where you're going?" Jing Xingji raised his eyebrows and asked, "Do you want to part ways with me?" "If fellow Daoist Jing has another purpose, then yes." Imo said bluntly, "For me, the most important thing is to find senior martial brother Shoujing, so I can't go somewhere else with fellow Daoist Jing first." "Fellow Daoist Jing?" Jing Xingji didn't say anything, but he also didn't leave. After a long time, Imo called him again when she didn't get an answer from him. Jing Xingji smiled then suddenly sighed. "Qin Shoujing, his life is really good." Not long ago, Nie Wuxiang said this to her, and now Jing Xingji also said the same thing to her. Imo had a feeling that this was absurd. In fact, cultivation was about not believing in fate. Since ancient times, how many people had ascended to immortality and become immortals? Since the separation of immortals and devils, there were only a few who entered the deification realm, let alone becoming immortals. Nevertheless, for hundreds of thousands of years, countless cultivators still rushed to enter this cruel cultivation world. They didn't believe in fate that they couldn't ascend to immortality. But now, both Nie Wuxiang and Jing Xingji said the same thing. Was his life good? Maybe Qin Shi's life was very smooth, but everything he had today definitely wasn't just because his life was good. Maybe she was the same. Although she wandered from place to place before she was 20, she gradually had everything after she turned 20. But these things also didn't fall from the sky. Whether it was Jing Xingji or Nie Wuxiang, both of them presumably understood these principles, but they both said the same thing. There could only be one explanation. They had too many sad stories in their hearts. Mo Tiange wasn't a talkative person, and she also wasn't interested in prying into other people's privacy, so she didn't answer and asked, "Where does fellow Daoist Jing want to go?" In an instant, Jing Xingji's expression returned to its previous frivolous expression. He said indifferently, "If I want to find Qin Shoujing, then I'll go. This is Immortal's ruins, and it's always dangerous to go alone." She didn't know whether he was referring to himself or her by danger. A thought flashed through Mo Tiange's mind, then she said, "All right. In that case, thank you for your kindness, fellow Daoist Jing." Jing Xingji waved his hand, not caring at all. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then tried to send a summoning talisman. This time, the summoning talisman was sent out, but it fell as soon as it entered the fog. "It seems Qin Shoujing is still in the fog. You'd better not waste the summoning talisman," Jing Xingji said. Mo Tiange regretfully watched the summoning talisman fall to the ground and burn to ashes. She was a bit disheartened. "Do I have to go back?" Jing Xingji thought for a moment, then asked, "Don't you have any other methods of communication?" This reminded Mo Tiange. It wasn't that there weren't other methods of communication, but they weren't as effective as the summoning talisman. Anyway, she didn't have any other methods, so she could give it a try. She took out a jade box from her robe and opened it. Inside were several yellow wax-like objects. They were amber. Qin Shi gave them to her in Kuanzhong City. He said they would emit a strange fragrance after they were burned. As long as they weren't far away, he could smell them. She didn't care at that time, but she didn't expect to use them now. Jing Xingji was stunned when he saw them. He said, "He actually gave them to you?" Mo Tiange looked up and glanced at Jing Xingji. "Fellow Daoist Jing, do you recognize them?" Jing Xingji didn't answer but asked, "Do you know how I met Qin Shoujing?" "I know a little." Jing Xingji smiled then sighed. Back then he didn't even have a Daoist name. In a flash, so many years have passed. Qin Shoujing's name has spread throughout Kunwu, but only a few people know his real name. Mo Tiange didn't answer. That was an era very far away from her. At that time, she didn't exist in this world. Jing Xingji sighed with emotion for a while, then said, "This thing was obtained from an ancient immortal's abode when we first met. Although it's not very useful, there should only be a few pieces in this world in his hands. Using this to communicate is a good method. This kind of fragrance is very special. If he really got lost, it might be able to guide him out. Moreover, it won't easily attract other people's attention." Upon receiving Jing Xingji's affirmation, Mo Tiange smiled. If that's really the case, that'd be the best. Then, just in case, the two of them flew a certain distance in silence. After making sure there was no one around, they sat down and burned the amber. As the flames burned, a strange fragrance they'd never smelled before slowly drifted away. Next, they could only wait. Not long after, maybe only about 2 hours, Jing Xingji suddenly moved and stood up. "Someone's coming." Mo Tiange spread her divine sense but was stunned. A powerful spiritual aura fluctuation came from the sky. It was definitely not Qin Shi but a nascent soul cultivator. The two of them glanced at each other. Jing Xingji only had time to say, "Late-stage nascent soul." A powerful spiritual aura pressure came down from above. A black cloud floated over. Mo Tiange looked up and saw that familiar black cloud. Her expression froze. "Master Song Feng." "It's them?" An arrogant hoarse voice came from the black cloud. Next to the black cloud, Nie Wuxiang's indifferent expression swept over Jing Xingji and Mo Tiange. "Yes, Master." Although Master Songfeng's body was hidden in the black cloud, Mo Tiange could still feel his malicious gaze sweeping over her and Jing Xingji's clothes. She didn't change out of Xianxia School's Daoist robes on this trip, so she couldn't avoid it now. They'd cautiously left the place where they parted ways with Nie Wuxiang, but they were still easily found. Mo Tiange felt a chill rising from her heart. She'd lived for more than 80 years and cultivated until she reached the core formation realm. She'd encountered many dangerous situations and experienced many life or death crises, but she'd never been as nervous as she was now. The number one cultivator in the celestial pole, the number one person in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, in front of Master Song Feng. Even if she was already in the core formation realm, she was still like an aura-refining cultivator, vulnerable at the first blow. She closed her eyes and silently ran the soul-refining art. Only then did she calm down under Master Song Feng's spiritual aura pressure. At this time, Jing Xingji gave her a meaningful look. Mo Tiange could see he was telling her not to act rashly. Master Song Feng's lazy voice came from the black cloud. "Girl, are you the disciple of that old man Qin Jinghe?" Mo Tiange's expression didn't change. She didn't even have to salute and answered calmly, "Yes, Senior is Master Song Feng?" Master Song Feng's voice was slightly surprised. Qin Jinghe taught his disciples well. Ma Xianin and Qin Shoujing aren't bad. Girl, your cultivation level isn't good, but you're quite courageous. Mo Tiange curled up the corners of her mouth and forced a smile. "Thank you for your praise, Senior. But Senior definitely didn't come here to praise Junior, right? Junior is timid. How about Senior give Junior a quick death?" Upon hearing what she said, a low, hoarse laugh came from the black cloud. Master Song Feng said, "Girl, you're quite interesting. You're much more pleasing to the eye than that old man Qin Jinghe. But it's a pity that you have a master like Qin Jinghe and a senior martial brother like Qin Shoujing. You can only consider yourself unlucky to run into my hands today." Chapter 299. Mo Tiange took a deep breath. She knew her luck had always been bad, but this time, she was unprecedentedly unlucky. Master Song Feng was the number one late-stage nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole. In front of him, she was just an ant at his mercy. But she was really unwilling. She had just stepped into the threshold of a high-level cultivator and had a bright future ahead of her. She also had congenial feelings for Qin Shi. This was the best moment of her life, so how could she be willing to die like this? Countless thoughts flashed through her mind, but in the end, Mo Tiange asked calmly, "Senior, what do you want?" Master Song Feng's cold voice came from the black cloud. Unexpectedly he asked, "Little girl, are you Qin Shoujing's sweetheart?" Mo Tiange was stunned. How did Master Song Feng know? At the same time, Nie Wuxiang looked surprised. She looked at Mo Tiange, full of questions. After hesitating for a long time, she finally said to Master Song Feng respectfully and carefully, "Master, this can't be right?" Master Song Feng let out a cold snort in displeasure. A strong gust of wind hit Nie Wuxiang's face, and with a pa sound, it solidly hit Nie Wuxiang's face, leaving an obvious red mark. Seeing this scene, Mo Tiange and Jing Xingji both frowned. They didn't expect this Master Song Feng to be so cruel to his disciple. Just one sentence didn't agree with him, and he was about to hit her. Nie Wuxiang didn't know whether it was because she was used to being hit or because her personality was like this, but she didn't make a sound after being hit. She didn't even raise her hand to cover her face and just lowered her head. "You dare to doubt me?" Nie Wuxiang lowered her head and answered calmly, "I don't dare. I'm just surprised." "What do you know?" Master Song Feng didn't hide his disgust and impatience toward his disciple in front of outsiders. He didn't even act like this toward Mo Tiange, his enemy's disciple. Mo Tiange and Jing Xingji looked at each other and frowned. The relationship between this master and disciple was too strange. "Senior." Jing Xingji thought about something and asked respectfully, "Please forgive Junior for talking too much. With Qin Shoujing's temperament, how could he have a sweetheart? Could it be that Senior has misunderstood?" She never expected that Jing Xingji would actually defend her in front of Master Song Feng. Although it might not necessarily be useful, Mo Tiange still felt grateful. Unfortunately, Master Song Feng wasn't polite at all. He snorted contemptuously and said, "Brat, this matter has nothing to do with your Gujin sect. It's better if you don't think you're smart. Otherwise, I won't give face to old Yuaning." For Master Song Feng, killing a core formation cultivator was nothing. Presumably, venerable swordsman Yuanying of Gujian's sect wouldn't seek revenge on Master Song Feng for a core formation junior, no matter how talented the junior was. Jing Xingji's heart was incomparably clear. Hearing those words, he clenched his fists tightly, but in the end he did not say anything. Master Song Feng's invisible gaze once again fell on Mo Tiange. Although this late-stage nascent soul cultivator in front of her didn't have a physical body, Mo Tiange could clearly feel his might. Senior. Under this kind of pressure, she chose to speak first. What advice does Senior have for me? How could I dare to give advice to Qin Jinghe's disciple? Master Song Feng said sarcastically. Soon after, he said proudly, you don't need to take chances. I just happened to run into Qin Jinghe and the others. Your master clearly told others that Qin Shoujing already has a sweetheart who's also his disciple. That Qin Shoujing also said he got separated from you here and was very anxious. Presumably, aside from you, there can't be anyone else in his heart, right? Upon hearing what Master Song Feng said, Mo Tiange's heart was filled with joy. In that case, senior martial brother Shoujing had already met up with Master? Then she could rest assured. With Master here, senior martial brother Shoujing would definitely be fine. Thinking up to this point, although the current situation was still a dead end for her, Mo Tiange's mood became better. She smiled and said to Master Song Feng, since I've fallen into Senior's hands, Junior has nothing to say. I wonder how Senior will deal with Junior? Her abnormally relaxed attitude made Master Song Feng a bit puzzled. Aren't you afraid? What if I'm afraid? Mo Tiange said faintly, will Senior let me go if I'm afraid? Junior has never done this kind of thing that's a waste of energy. The black cloud was quiet for a while, but Master Song Feng's laughter came from inside. Haha, you're really interesting, little girl. What a pity, what a pity. You just had to be that old fool Qin Jinghe's disciple. His voice turned cold, and he said with an evil smile, Qin Jinghe's last disciple, Qin Shoujing's sweetheart? God is really on my side. If I kill you, those two people will definitely be in so much pain that they'll wish they were dead, right? Master Song Feng's gloomy voice sent a chill down Mo Tiange's back. She composed herself and said, Senior thinks too highly of me. Junior's master and senior martial brother are both people with very firm Dao hearts. If Junior dies an unnatural death, maybe they'll be sad for a while, but for cultivators, the most important thing is still the path to immortality. Nothing will change. What she said wasn't just an excuse, it was also what she really thought. If she died, her master and senior martial brother Shoujing would naturally be sad for her. However, they were all cultivators, and for cultivators, what could be more important than the great Dao? No matter how sad something was, it would pass. Only the great Dao was the supreme pursuit. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange suddenly felt a bit depressed. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. Could it be that after confessing her feelings, she also became sentimental? What was so strange about that? They were cultivators. For cultivators, there might be unforgettable feelings, but they wouldn't be in so much pain that they'd wish they were dead. Master! Nie Wuxiang, who was standing next to the black cloud, suddenly spoke. She stared at Mo Tiange and said, Master, if you want to kill her, can you let disciple do it? Fellow Daoist Nye. Jing Xingji couldn't help but say, Ew? Nie Wuxiang's gaze swept over them, but it didn't linger on Jing Xingji. She only looked respectfully at the black cloud. After a while, Master Song Feng's voice came from the black cloud. Do you want to compete with her? Nie Wuxiang said faintly, Disciple didn't defeat her several decades ago, so I'm not convinced. I hope Master can help me. Mo Tiange couldn't help but glance at Nie Wuxiang. Her expression was very calm. Mo Tiange couldn't tell whether she wanted to help her or not. However, if Master Song Feng agreed to this matter, it would definitely be beneficial to her. Although Nie Wuxiang was formidable, it wouldn't be a problem for her to hold on for less than an hour. At that time, Master Song Feng's cold interrupted her thoughts, but she heard him say, Who said I wanted to kill her? What he said stunned Mo Tiange and the other two. Nie Wuxiang was even more stunned for a while. She then said with some uncertainty, Master, don't kill her? As soon as she finished speaking, another gust of strong wind swept past, leaving another red mark on her fair cheeks. Master Song Feng's impatient voice rang out. You dare to guess this old man's thoughts? Nie Wuxiang shut her mouth, lowered her head, and said nothing. This master and disciple really didn't look like master and disciple. Nie Wuxiang's respect towards Master Song Feng was more of fear, and Master Song Feng didn't cherish Nie Wuxiang at all. It could even be said that even a servant wouldn't lower himself to this extent, let alone a disciple. Mo Tiange suddenly understood what Nie Wuxiang said when they met. With such a master, it was no wonder she envied her good life. In comparison, her life was indeed much better. Master had never said a harsh word to her and was always considerate of her. Mo Tiange didn't hate Nie Wuxiang because they were originally on opposite sides, so it was normal for Nie Wuxiang to turn around and tell her master about her whereabouts. Of course, she didn't love Nie Wuxiang because Nie Wuxiang was her enemy. Mo Tiange wasn't a person who would waste her sympathy casually. Now, seeing Nie Wuxiang without the slightest dignity in front of Master Song Feng, Mo Tiange only felt it was a pity. It was a pity that this rather proud woman was actually Master Song Feng's disciple. Kill her? Of course, if I do that, Qin Jinghe and Qin Shoujing will definitely be in a lot of pain. But it doesn't seem that interesting. And I have to think about how to deal with this little girl. I got it. The voice in the black cloud suddenly became very strange. It sounded complacent, but it also made people's hair stand on end. Mo Tiange felt a powerful spiritual aura pressure covering her body, making her unable to move. A wave of fear that made her shiver suddenly enveloped her whole body. Little girl, you're actually quite good-looking, the voice in the black cloud said. Mo Tiange suddenly thought of a possibility. Cold sweat instantly broke out on her body. It couldn't really be like what I thought, right? The black cloud swayed. The voice was so soft that it made people's hair stand on end. Little girl, if you want to blame someone, blame your senior martial brother Shoujing. Who told you to be so coincidentally loved by him? I really want to see how he'll feel after the woman he loves loses her virginity. Qin Shoujing, you killed my disciple, so I'll let you have a taste of what it's like to eat a fly. Mo Tiange finally heard this affirmation. She felt her brain go numb in an instant, and she almost lost her mind. In that instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. In the end, she blurted out, "You're just a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, yet you actually want to do such a despicable thing." Despicable? Master Song Feng's voice was cold. Little girl, in this cultivation world where the weak are prey to the strong, could it be that there's still such a noble thing? Be that as it may, Senior's way of thinking is a bit too filthy. The one who spoke was Jing Xingji. His expression was extremely unsightly. Senior did such a thing to a junior. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by the cultivation world? Haha. Master Song Feng laughed. Why would I be afraid of being ridiculed? Brat, can't you tell? You're the one who should be worried. Jing Xingji was dumbfounded. What do you mean? Oomph. Master Song Feng disdained to answer. The black cloud surged, and a strong wind suddenly rose around Mo Tiange and Jing Xingji, carrying a bitingly cold aura, oppressing them. Mo Tiange couldn't care about anything else. She instantly summoned the white silk handkerchief to protect her body. Then she pressed the space between her eyebrows, wanting to enter the virtual sky world. She wasn't someone who couldn't keep her cool, but Master Song Feng's words had already made her lose her mind. This kind of thing was too disgusting. However, in front of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, how could she make it in time? She felt her whole body go numb, and in an instant, she lost consciousness. Chapter 300. Master. Inside the fog, she suddenly stopped and frowned. What's wrong? Lord Daoist Jinghe asked casually. She sniffed the smell in the air and said, Tiange might be sending a message. Lord Daoist Jinghe tilted his head. She sniffed again and finally nodded with certainty. Yes, it's Tiange. Hearing his certainty, Lord Daoist Jinghe asked curiously, "Is there any special communication method between you and Tiange?" Xianxia said, "Sort of. I didn't expect to use it at that time. Master, follow this smell. Tiange must be there." Lord Daoist Jinghe also sniffed. The smell in the air was very similar to the smell of flowers and plants. If he didn't pay attention, he might think it was the smell of nearby flowers and plants, but if he smelled it carefully, it seemed very unique. Since this guy was so sure, it must be his personal property. Following this smell, the two of them walked forward slowly. At first, they had to take their time to distinguish the smell, but as the smell became stronger, they walked faster and faster. The fog gradually faded, and in the blink of an eye, the two of them left the fog. Lord Daoist Jinghe said in surprise, "This girl, she came out a long time ago." Xianxia was also very happy to see this. She's always been smart. I wonder what method she thought of. As they spoke, the two of them stopped. This was the place with the strongest smell. At the same time, Xianxia also found a pile of black ash on the ground, proving that the smell really came from here. But the strange thing was there was no one around. He spread his divine sense, but there was no one within dozens of miles. "Master?" Xianxia was puzzled. "Did you find anyone around?" Lord Daoist Jinghe shook his head. "No." The divine sense of a nascent soul cultivator covered a large area, but there was no spiritual aura fluctuation of cultivators as far as his divine sense could reach. Lord Daoist Jinghe turned to look in the direction they came from and said, "Could it be that she went inside again?" "Probably not." Xianxia frowned. "Tiange has always been steady. Since she sent a message here, she should be waiting for us here unless it's been too long or something happened." "Something happened?" Lord Daoist Jinghe looked solemn. His eyes swept the surrounding scenery like lightning, and his expression suddenly changed. "Not good." "What's wrong?" Xianxia asked anxiously. "Master, what did you see?" Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't answer right away. With a wave of his sleeve, a wisp of faint red spiritual aura filled the air and shrouded the surroundings. Gradually, a bit of black appeared in the faint red. Xianxia's expression also changed. "This is demonic qi." Lord Daoist Jinghe frowned. "There's no devil aura at all in Immortal's ruins. This devil aura is also very different from the devil aura on Demonic Mountain. I've only seen this kind of devil aura on one person." Xianxia didn't need to say anything because he already knew. He muttered, "Master Song Feng, yes." Lord Daoist Jinghe's expression darkened. Master Song Feng was here. Xianxia's complexion turned even paler. He almost didn't dare to imagine what had happened. Master Song Feng had been here, but Tiange wasn't there. She was in the early stage of the core formation realm, the #1 cultivator in the celestial pole. "Don't worry." Lord Daoist Jinghe comforted him and took something out of his robe. It was a very small lamp, only the size of a palm. The light inside the lampshade was very bright. This was Tiange's natal primordial spirit lamp. Lord Daoist Jinghe asked her for her blood essence to make it. As long as she was alive, this lamp would always be on. Seeing that the lamp was bright, Lord Daoist Jinghe smiled. "You see, her natal lamp is fine, so she must be fine. There's no trace of fighting around, so maybe Tiange has already escaped." Right? Xianxia nodded. After taking a deep breath, he pulled himself together. "Master, let's look for her again. Maybe Tiange was taken away by Master Song Feng, or maybe she's smart and ran away." Although the latter possibility was very low, it wasn't completely impossible. The fact that her natal lamp was so bright showed that she was still in good condition, which was a good thing. There were no traces of fighting around, so maybe Master Song Feng just took her away. Lord Daoist Jinghe was gratified to see that Xianxia could still maintain his composure and didn't panic. "Since it was Tiange who sent the message, can we follow this smell to find her again?" Xianxia thought for a moment. "We can try. He got this amber when he got the Yang spiritual bead years ago. It was an ancient object, and he didn't know its use at first. Once, he accidentally burned it with real fire and found that its smell was special and could spread very far, so he thought it could be used to send messages. When he gave it to Tiange, he didn't think too much. He just thought the amber was very beautiful and rare in the world, so he wanted to please her. Unexpectedly, Tiange didn't pay attention to the amber among the pile of things, which made him feel lost for a long time. Now the amber actually came in handy, which was a pleasant surprise. It was much more difficult to follow the smell to find her again. The smell was getting fainter and fainter, and it was difficult to distinguish it. They kept looking and kept looking back. As time passed, Tiange's natal lamp seemed to show signs of weakening, so they couldn't help but become more and more anxious. The most terrible thing was that no matter how they looked, the most likely place for Tiange to go was still in the fog. When the appointed time with Lord Daoist Huayan came, they still couldn't find Tiange. Lord Daoist Jinghe had no choice but to send a message to Lord Daoist Huayan to find her together. In that case, if they met Master Song Feng, they might have a chance. Lord Daoist Huayan didn't have any objection. Tiange wasn't an ordinary disciple. With her talent, she would definitely become the pillar of the new generation of Xianxia school in 100 years. As a Lord Daoist of the nascent soul realm, he should consider the interests of the school. However, they didn't have much time. The two Lord Daoists and the two nascent soul cultivators of Tiandao sect had an appointment to go to Jade Palace in Immortal's ruins. There was still half a day before their meeting. If they missed it, it would be hard to explain. Soon after, the three of them met, and Lord Daoist Huayan asked, "Senior Martial Brother Jinghe, what's going on? Why was Qingwei taken by Master Song Feng?" Lord Daoist Jinghe said, "We'll talk about it later. Junior Martial Brother Huayan, we don't have much time. Let's go find her first." Lord Daoist Huayan nodded and said, "Okay." Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Huayan each took out their flying magic weapons and disappeared into the fog in the blink of an eye. Tiange felt like she was dreaming, a bizarre and painful dream. "Master!" She heard a familiar voice with some anxiety. Isn't this too?" With a heavy bang, an old hoarse voice said angrily, "What? Do you sympathize with her?" "I don't dare." "Since you don't dare, do it." Then she heard light footsteps, then she was helped up, and something was stuffed into her mouth. It was some bean-like things. She was afraid instinctively that she shouldn't swallow these things. She was worried that this person would force her to swallow them, but this person just lifted her chin and put one hand on her throat. Those things didn't slide in. But as time went by, the things in her mouth seemed to ooze juice and slowly flowed down her throat. Then she felt that her remaining rationality was gone. Her whole body became hot, as if she was melting in the flames. The three of them flew back and forth for a long time. The smell became fainter and fainter, but they still couldn't find Tiange. She was very anxious. He knew it was very important for Master and Martial Uncle Huayan to go to Jade Palace. If they couldn't find Tiange when the time was up, Martial Uncle Huayan wouldn't be willing to waste time. The longer they waited, the more dangerous it would be for Tiange. "Master?" He turned around and only said one sentence, but Lord Daoist Jinghe raised his hand to stop him. Lord Daoist Jinghe was also very anxious. The matter of Jade Palace was related to his chance to advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm, but he also valued Tiange's life. He didn't want to give up either. But when the time was up, he had to give up one of them. Lord Daoist Jinghe's expression changed for a long time. Finally, he made up his mind and said, "It's too late. This is the only way." For a moment, she didn't know what Lord Daoist Jinghe meant. Lord Daoist Huayan's expression changed when he saw Lord Daoist Jinghe taking out a natal lamp from his bosom. "Senior Martial Brother, this will affect your strength." Lord Daoist Jinghe was unmoved. He said faintly, "I can still afford to lose this bit of strength. Junior Martial Brother Huayan, you don't need to say more." After that, he pressed the space between his eyebrows and was about to cast a spell. "Master." However, it was Qin Shi who stopped him. He reached out to cover the natal lamp, which was still lit but a bit weaker than before. He knew what Master wanted to do. The fog blocked divine sense, but the connection between blood essence couldn't be stopped, so Master wanted to force his own blood essence to sense Tiange's location. That was absolutely impossible. Every cultivator knew the importance of blood essence. If it was lost, his strength would decline a bit. Normally, he could recover it with some time. However, the place Lord Daoist Jinghe was going to was not a small matter. There were many nascent soul cultivators. If he lost some of his strength, his chances of survival would be lower. She took a deep breath, and a resolute expression appeared on his face. Master, let me do it. You. Lord Daoist Jinghe paused. I might not be able to take you with me later. If you lose your strength, what will you do in Immortal's ruins? She smiled and said confidently, Master, don't you trust me? More than 80 years ago, I was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, but I still survived in Immortal's ruins, let alone now. Lord Daoist Jinghe looked pensive, but in the end, he nodded. All right, if you have something to do, find a safe place to hide and send a message to Master. Don't take too many risks. Master, you're still worried about me? She smiled. He took Tiange's natal primordial spirit lamp from Lord Daoist Jinghe, pressed the space between his eyebrows, and began to cast a spell. A spiritual light appeared between his eyebrows. Soon after, a drop of dark red blood essence was forced out of the space between his eyebrows. She carefully guided this drop of blood essence to fly towards the natal lamp, merging it with the blood essence hidden deep inside. In an instant, a strange feeling appeared in his mind. In a hazy state, everything around him seemed to be far away, but some other things were extremely clear. The natal primordial spirit lamp swayed, and its light seemed to be a bit weaker. After a moment of confusion, she became sober again, and he had a clear direction. This way. Chapter 301. The three of them flew higher and higher in the fog. Lord Daoist Huayan waved his sleeves to block an immortal aura and asked Shi with a frown, Shoujing, are you sure? Why is it in the sky? Is it flying? It should be, Shi said. I also think it's strange. The position hasn't changed. It seems to be in the sky. As they were talking, Lord Daoist Jinghe's divine sense found something. He said, there's a mountain there. Shi and Lord Daoist Huayan immediately understood. Shi asked, Master, is there anyone in the mountain? Lord Daoist Jinghe shook his head. There are too many things in the mountain. My divine sense can't explore in detail in this fog. Although the divine sense of a nascent soul cultivator was much stronger and wouldn't easily get lost in this fog, the fog was so strange that divine sense couldn't play its original role. Shi understood this but didn't say much. He just sighed. On second thought, he already knew where Tiange was. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore, he restrained himself and followed the two nascent soul Daoists. The lonely mountain finally appeared in their sight. Because of the fog, they could only see its rough outline. As soon as they approached the lonely mountain, Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Huayan looked at each other and frowned. Lord Daoist Jinghe whispered, something's wrong. There are two people. She didn't understand what he meant. He was happy and asked, Master, did you feel it? Yes. Lord Daoist Jinghe said absent-mindedly, it's a bit strange. What's strange? Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't answer this question. He shook his sleeves, and the flying magic tool suddenly sped up and flew to the top of the lonely mountain. Lord Daoist Huayan followed him without saying a word. The three of them flew close and hovered over the mountain. The top of the mountain was covered with spiritual herbs with pink ball-like flowers, swaying in the wind and exuding an intoxicating smell. She looked down and saw soybean-sized beans under the spiritual herbs. They were densely stacked layer after layer and covered the whole mountain. The rocks were long gone. Heavenly aromatic beans. Until now, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. It seemed that something had happened without him knowing. When Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Huayan saw the heavenly aromatic grasses all over the mountain, their expressions changed. But they didn't say anything. How could they say something like that before they were certain? To people? If it was really Master Song Feng who brought Tiange here, His intentions were truly damned. In silence, the three of them descended to the peak. The flat mountaintop gradually became clear in the eyes of the three. Amidst the heavenly aromatic grass, the pink flower balls, and the green vines that filled the sky, a blue and white color appeared. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a robe. Xianxia subconsciously held his breath. In an instant, his heart was seized by panic. Blue robes, white coats, cloak. These were the clothes of Xianxia school's female disciples, but there was also a man's cyan sword robe. This was Gujian sect's uniform. Finally, there were two people submerged in the heavenly aromatic grass. Even though they were not hugging each other, even though there was a distance between them, the chaotic scene and their messy clothes were enough to explain what had happened. For a split second, Xianxia felt that there was nothing in his mind. He had never imagined that he would see such a scene. What had happened? Why was this happening? He wanted to calm down, but he couldn't calm down. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he staggered forward. Lord Daoist Jinghe called from behind but didn't stop him. Finally, he ran up to her. Under the pink flower balls of the heavenly aromatic grass was the familiar face he used to yearn for day and night. At this moment, her eyes were closed tightly and she was unconscious. He opened his mouth but couldn't make a sound. He suddenly began to hate himself. Why didn't I keep an eye on her at that time? Why did I let her get lost and encounter such a terrible thing? If I could have been more careful, if they could have found her earlier. But now, all he could do was reach out his trembling hands, pick her up, and hold her tightly in his arms. But even so, what happened couldn't be erased. Lord Daoist Jinghe caught up and sighed when he saw this scene. Calm down. Xianxia didn't answer as if he hadn't heard anything. Lord Daoist Huayan walked closer, glanced around, and fixed his eyes on another unconscious person. He snorted coldly. Gujian sect. Who's this? How dare you? Lord Daoist Jinghe wasn't a kind person. Seeing this scene, he was already burning with anger, but he managed to suppress it because Xianxia's reaction wasn't right. When he heard Lord Daoist Huayan's words, he waved his sleeve, and a spiritual aura shot out, hitting Jing Xingji's body firmly. Jing Xingji groaned, spat out a mouthful of blood, and passed out again. Lord Daoist Jinghe turned around and called out. Xianxia didn't move. He just held Immortal motionlessly. Lord Daoist Jinghe frowned, stepped forward, and put his hand on Xianxia's shoulder. Wake up. After a long time, Xianxia's eyes finally moved, and he found that there were tears in his eyes. He wiped them away, took a deep breath, and tried to suppress his emotions. Master, I'm fine. Because of what happened, he couldn't let anything happen to him. Seeing that Xianxia came back to his senses, Lord Daoist Jinghe breathed a sigh of relief and said gently, It's good that you understand. Don't worry. Tiange is fine. It should be because of the drug. She'll wake up in a while. Xianxia lowered his head and answered, carefully pulling Tiange's clothes. During this process, he didn't look at Jing Xingji next to him. Lord Daoist Jinghe paused and asked tentatively, What are you going to do? If you want to kill this boy, I'll do it now. A murderous aura flashed in Xianxia's eyes, but he suppressed it in the end. No need. I still have something to ask him. If I want to kill him, I'll do it myself. All right. Lord Daoist Jinghe was silent for a while. He looked at Tiange, and a meaningful light flashed in his eyes. He asked slowly, What do you think after this happened? Xianxia sat blankly for a while and seemed to hear what Lord Daoist Jinghe said. He held the unconscious Tiange in his arms and said faintly, Master, what do you want to hear? Lord Daoist Jinghe couldn't say it for a while, so he thought about it and changed his words. You don't care? Xianxia clenched his fists as if he was trying his best to suppress himself. But after a while, he still couldn't suppress himself, so he suddenly slapped his palm down. His spiritual aura was turbulent, tearing all the heavenly aromatic grasses around him to pieces. How could I not care? He said through clenched teeth, glaring fiercely at Jing Xingji not far from him. I wish I could kill him and tear him into pieces. I want to grind Master Songfang's bones into ashes even more. But doing that will only let me vent my hatred. Things have already happened. If Tiange wakes up, she'll definitely be the one suffering the most. So you don't mind? Xianxia didn't answer this question. He closed his eyes and shook his head. Master, don't ask me. My mind is in a mess right now. Chapter 302. Xianxia never thought such a thing would happen one day. From the day Yi Hai entrusted his daughter to him more than 80 years ago, Mo Tiange's safety was his responsibility. When he returned from Demonic Mountain injured, he sent Yi Jingwen to the secular world to pick up the little girl. Unfortunately, her uncle, Yi Jiang, chose to escape with her. At that time, he thought it was the Yi family's own choice. In that case, he didn't violate his oath, so he didn't need to worry about it. Therefore, during those 10 years, he never looked for the whereabouts of the uncle and nephew. Later, when he met her in Yunwu sect and discovered that she was the little girl from back then, he thought he still couldn't escape this responsibility. Since he met her again, for Yi Hai's sake, he had to protect her in the future. Then he would take her back to Xianqing school and let his master accept her as his disciple. He would watch her grow up step by step, and he would be moved little by little. The current Mo Tiange was no longer the little girl from back then. She was already a core formation cultivator and had grown to the point where she had the strength to protect herself. He also thought he could finally change his identity from her protector to her lover. But he never expected that the reality would be so cruel. He just wanted to change his identity, and she, who he had protected for so many years, was hurt like this. Why did this happen? He didn't need to think too much to guess the reason. Master Song Feng hated him and his master. He happened to meet Mo Tiange alone, so he retaliated on her. If it weren't for them, Master Song Feng wouldn't even look at a little core formation cultivator, let alone come up with such a sinister idea. For so many years, he always thought he was her protector, but he didn't expect that the pure Yin constitution he worried about didn't bring disaster to her. In the end, she suffered this kind of thing because of him. Boy, you don't have to blame yourself. Hearing his master's voice, he smiled sadly and said softly, "Rest assured, master. I know what to do." "Shoujing, you really don't have to blame yourself," Lord Daoist Huayan said with a faint smile. "Qingwei's primordial Yin is still there, which means the thing you worried about didn't happen." Xianxia suddenly looked up at Lord Daoist Huayan and then at his master. The two nascent soul Lord Daoists both had smiles on their faces, which didn't seem fake. "Master?" He cast a pleading gaze towards Lord Daoist Jinghe. "Martial Uncle Huai, is what he said true?" Lord Daoist Jinghe smiled. "Of course it's true. Otherwise I would have already killed this brat. Why would I still ask you?" That's right. With Master's violent personality, if something like this had happened to his disciple, even if Jing Xingji had been tricked, he would definitely kill him to vent his anger. How could he still be so calm? He was the one who became excited when he saw the scene in front of him, so he naturally thought. Tiange was in the same realm as him now. He couldn't see whether her primordial Yin was still there or not, but his master and martial Uncle Huayan could. Realizing this, Xianxia was ecstatic for a moment, then angry for a moment. He shouted, "Master, did you do this on purpose?" Lord Daoist Jinghe burst into laughter and said complacently, "Brat, no matter how smart you are, you're still a layman when it comes to this kind of thing. Master can tell at a glance." Xianxia wanted to get angry, but after experiencing the misunderstanding just now and learning the truth, he only felt incomparably happy. Even though he was ridiculed by Lord Daoist Jinghe, he couldn't make an angry expression, so his face twisted. On the side, Lord Daoist Huayan stroked his beard with a smile. He also thought it was very interesting. However, he was more like a senior than Lord Daoist Jinghe. After laughing for a while, he said, "Senior Martial Brother Jinghe, since Qingwei has been found and is fine, we should go to Jade Palace to meet them." Right? Lord Daoist Jinghe stopped laughing and said to Xianxia seriously, Jade Palace is too dangerous, so it's not convenient for me to take you there. Since Tiange is fine, I'll leave the rest to you." Xianxia knew the trip to Jade Palace was very important to his master. His master had been stuck in the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm for many years and hadn't had a chance to advance. He came to Demonic Mountain this time because there were precious treasures in Jade Palace in Immortal's ruins. Master, don't worry. When Xianxia wakes up, we'll go find her father's remains and go back. We won't stay here for long. It's good that you know what to do. This time, the restrictions on Demonic Mountain are unstable, so it's not good to stay here for long. Lord Daoist Xianxia paused, took out several things from his robe, and handed them to him. There's not much time, and Xianxia hasn't woken up yet, so I won't take you out. I've marked the path just now. Just follow the compass, and you won't get lost again. Yes, master. Xianxia took these things and put them away without any nonsense. In addition to the compass, there were several magic weapons and talismans, all of which were his master's treasures. He just used his blood essence to protect himself. After thinking for a while, he asked again, Master, is Master Song Feng also going to Jade Palace? Lord Daoist Xianxia's face darkened. Most likely. What else can catch his eye except Jade Palace? He sneered. Xianxia is fine, but this is definitely his plot. If I meet him again, I'll have to settle accounts with him. Senior Martial Brother Xianxia. Lord Daoist Huayan frowned worriedly. Master Song Feng is indeed powerful. I'm afraid the two of us are no match for him, right? What are you afraid of? Lord Daoist Xianxia said faintly, we're not the only ones who want to deal with him. There'll always be an opportunity. Lord Daoist Huayan was speechless. He thought for a while and nodded with a sigh. He had a grudge against Master Song Feng. Even if this didn't happen, he would still fight with him. What was there to be afraid of? Master, it's dangerous on Demonic Mountain. You and Martial Uncle Huayan should protect yourselves first. As for Master Song Feng, Xianxia's face was full of killing intent. After this trip, I'll advance to the nascent soul realm, and I'll deal with him sooner or later. Good. Lord Daoist Xianxia patted him on the shoulder and laughed. You're ambitious. You're indeed my disciple. I'm not as strong as him, but all my disciples are better than him. Xianxia smiled. Master, you and Martial Uncle Huayan should go quickly. It'll be too late if you don't go now. Lord Daoist Xianxia rolled his eyes, glanced at Jing Xingji, who was seriously injured by him, and asked, What about this boy? What are you going to do? Xianxia glanced at Jing Xingji, who vomited blood after being beaten by Lord Daoist Xianxia, and said faintly, There are some things I have to ask him. All right. Lord Daoist Xianxia knew he had an idea, so he didn't care anymore. In the end, he said, Go out as soon as possible. Don't stay too long. Xianxia nodded and watched him and Lord Daoist Huayan take out their flying magic weapons and leave together. When the figures of the two nascent soul Lord Daoists disappeared, Xianxia looked at the scene in front of him and couldn't help but feel angry. Although it didn't really happen, the scene in front of him showed that Jing Xingji definitely took advantage of Xianxia. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but want to hit Jing Xingji. But Jing Xingji had some friendship with him, and he needed an explanation from him, so he could only endure it for now. He looked down at Xianxia. She was still unconscious. He felt her pulse and checked her condition. Indeed, as Master said, she wasn't injured. It was probably because of the drug that she hadn't woken up yet. He thought for a moment, picked up Xianxia's clothes and put them on her. Only now did he understand Lord Daoist Xianxia's meaning. Xianxia's outer clothes weren't there, but her underwear was still intact. Obviously, she wasn't violated. Sure enough, Master had sharp eyes and found the key point at a glance. As for Xianxia, he lost his sense of propriety as soon as he saw the scene in front of him. But this was too strange. If Master Song Feng was determined to make Xianxia lose her chastity, why did he leave her and Jing Xingji here? There were heavenly aromatic grasses everywhere. If the two of them were really affected, why did the two of them pass out here in the end? Did an accident happen, or were they stopped by others? Of course, it was also possible that everything was wrong. After all, Master Song Feng's involvement was just their guess. Just as he thought up to this point, he heard a groan. He looked up and saw Jing Xingji moving his hands and feet. He woke up. Jing Xingji felt his head hurt, and his chest hurt even more. He knew he was injured, but he didn't know what happened. He closed his eyes and gasped for breath for a while. When he felt his breathing was a bit smoother, he opened his eyes with difficulty. The moment he opened his eyes, he was startled. Xianxia was sitting not far away, holding Xianxia and staring at him coldly with cold eyes. Although Xianxia had never been friendly to him, his gaze carried a hint of anger. Then he realized something was wrong with his body, so he lowered his head and scared himself again. He was actually half naked. This. Jing Xingji opened his mouth and found his voice was extremely hoarse. He gulped then asked, "What happened?" Xianxia sneered. "Don't you remember?" His tone made Jing Xingji frown. He looked at his half-naked appearance then looked at Xianxia's posture of protecting Xianxia. Suddenly, some memories flashed in his mind, and he was greatly shocked. Seeing that Jing Xingji seemed to remember something, the anger in Xianxia's heart intensified. He stared at Jing Xingji coldly but didn't say a word. Under his gaze, Jing Xingji wanted to defend himself, but he felt he had nothing to say. Say he had no choice? Things had already happened, and he already knew what this junior martial sister meant to Qin Shoujing. What was the point of saying this? After a long time, he said, "If you want to kill me, I have nothing to say." "So, you also think you deserve to die?" "Of course not." Jing Xingji looked up and said, "I don't think I did anything wrong. I didn't want to do this. Although I like beauties, I'm not interested in other people's women. However, things have already happened, and I don't want to shirk any responsibility. If you want to kill me to vent your anger, I have nothing to say. Of course, I will not fight back." After a moment of silence, Xianxia said, "You didn't want to?" "Yes, we ran into Master Song Feng. He hated you and your master, so he vented his anger on your junior martial sister. He brought us here and fed us heavenly aromatic beans, so..." What Jing Xingji said was consistent with their guesses. However, from what he said, it seemed that he didn't know what happened in the end. What was going on? Xianxia was confused. Chapter 303. After a long silence, "What do you remember?" Xianxia's question startled Jing Xingji. Remember what? He remembered being restrained by Master Song Feng, brought here, forced to eat heavenly aromatic beans, and seeing Mo Qingwei in a daze. At first, he was still rational and tried his best to restrain himself, but before he could think of a way, the drug took effect. He only thought it was a woman, so he tried to pull her clothes. Unexpectedly, she was still rational and resisted. Then, he felt a headache and lost consciousness. Right. Jing Xingji suddenly jumped up, looked down at his body, and breathed a sigh of relief. Although he was half naked, his lower body was intact. He was scared by his own memory just now, but it seemed he didn't do anything. Although he wasn't Qin Shoujing's best friend, he really felt uncomfortable sleeping with his woman. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Thinking of this, a thought flashed in Jing Xingji's mind, and he asked, "You knew? Nothing happened between us." Xianxia showed a faint smile, feeling relieved. Since Jing Xingji said so, it seemed nothing really happened. If something happened to Xianxia, he wouldn't mind, but it would be very cruel for both him and Xianxia. "Are you sure nothing happened?" he asked again. When Jing Xingji saw his expression, he let out a sigh of relief. He took out a healing medicinal pill and swallowed it. When his injuries recovered a little, he went to pick up his clothes and said impatiently, "I've suffered a great loss. I've lost so much face, but all I did was strip your woman's clothes." Hearing this, Xianxia's face darkened, and he said coldly, "You still dare to say that?" Not to mention stripping her clothes, he was furious even if he was hit once. If this person wasn't Jing Xingji, he would beat him up to vent his anger even if he didn't kill him. Xianxia took a deep breath and swallowed his anger. He then asked slowly, "What happened in the end? Since Master Song Feng deliberately retaliated against us, why are you all fine?" Jing Xingji put on his clothes and carefully recalled everything he remembered. In the end, he said, I felt like someone knocked me out. Someone? Xianxia was puzzled. Who else would come here? This kind of lonely peak was extremely high, and it was also shrouded in fog. Unless it was intentional, who would come up here? If someone came here casually, Master Song Feng wouldn't have chosen such a place. Jing Xingji thought for a while, then shook his head. Your junior sister seems to be better than me. Ask her when she wakes up. Maybe she knows. Xianxia answered, but he continued to stare at him without saying anything. Jing Xingji felt a chill run down his spine. I've already said that I haven't touched her. You're not thinking of killing me to vent your anger, are you? Xianxia said coldly, you didn't touch her, but you were the one who took off her clothes, right? You can't blame me for this. Jing Xingji said confidently, don't tell me you're going to argue about this too? I didn't even get to kiss her. Jing Xingji's words made Xianxia feel a bit better. He looked at Immortal in his arms, paused for a while, then said, I don't want to kill you to vent my anger, but I also don't want her to see you again. You should leave first. Jing Xingji sighed and said, I know you've already shown mercy to me, and I'm not an ungrateful person. Since that's the case, let's meet again. He no longer nagged. He stood up, picked up his things, rode his flying sword, and flew away. Fortunately, Master Song Feng probably didn't care about the two core formation cultivators things, so he didn't pick up their Qinkuan bags. Otherwise, it would really be a big loss. The two of them weren't ordinary core formation cultivators, and the treasures they had on them couldn't be compared to ordinary core formation cultivators. Jing Xingji walked far away, and Xianxia withdrew his gaze. The matter was temporarily resolved, but it was far from over. Even if this kind of thing didn't happen in the end, it would still hurt Immortal. Now, he only hoped that Immortal's state of mind wasn't affected. In addition, Master Song Feng's move was really sinister. If it really happened, even if he caught Immortal and killed her, it still wouldn't be as disgusting as this move. Master always said this person was the #1 cultivator in the celestial pole, but in fact, he was neither human nor ghost. He was psychopathic and wasn't a normal person since a long time ago. Sure enough, he was right. After an unknown amount of time, Immortal woke up from the darkness. After regaining consciousness, the first thing she felt was a headache, a splitting headache. You're awake. A gentle voice came into her ears. It was Xianxia, senior martial brother. She called out and reached out her hand. Just as she was about to say something, some scenes suddenly flashed in her mind. Her eyes widened and she jumped up in fright. When she opened her eyes, the person she saw was indeed Xianxia. Seeing her panicked look, Xianxia comforted her with gentle words. Don't be afraid. It's okay now. You're safe now. His gentleness calmed Immortal down a little, but when she recalled what happened before she fainted, she couldn't stay calm. She grabbed Xianxia's clothes, raised her head, and asked in panic, Senior martial brother, did I? No. Xianxia knew what she wanted to ask, so he hugged her without hesitation. Nothing happened. Don't be afraid. You'll be fine. No. Immortal shook her head in despair. You don't know what happened. But, Master Song Feng, Jing Xingji. She was almost incoherent. I know. Xianxia hugged her tightly and comforted her. I know what you're saying. Don't be afraid. It's really okay. You're fine. Nothing happened. Feel it, isn't it? Such comforting and hugging comforted Immortal. She listened to him and felt that her clothes were intact and there was nothing wrong with her body. Then she slowly calmed down and muttered to herself, No, nothing happened. Nothing, yes, nothing. Nothing happened. Xianxia patted her back and repeated softly. Immortal's mood gradually eased from his gentle voice. She leaned on his shoulder and tried to calm down. After a long time, she finally felt that everything was true. Nothing terrible really happened to her. She finally returned to normal and asked, Senior martial brother, how did you find this place? I thought you and Master couldn't find me. When she was brought here by Master Song Feng and fed with heavenly aromatic beans, her heart was full of despair. She fervently hoped that Master and him would come to save her, but even when she lost her mind, they still didn't come. Feeling her trembling, Xianxia hugged her tighter and hated Master Song Feng even more in his heart. Xianxia had always been very courageous, but this time, she was so scared. It could be imagined how frightened and desperate she was at that time. It was Master who thought of a way. He didn't mention that he used his blood essence and only said, "We found this place. Fortunately, you're fine." "Did you guys save me in time?" "No. When we arrived, you and Xinxingji were already unconscious." Seeing that her mood had returned to normal, Xianxia told her in detail what he saw when he arrived. He especially explained that only her outer clothes were torn, but her undergarments were intact and there was a distance between her and Xinxingji's. Xianxia listened to him one by one, lost in thought. When Xianxia finished, she asked, "Did you see anyone else besides us?" This question puzzled Xianxia. He said, "Xinxingji said someone seemed to have knocked him out. Do you still remember?" Xianxia slowly recalled. At that time, Wuxia showed mercy to her. She didn't actually swallow those heavenly aromatic beans, but some juice flowed into her body, so she was affected. After feeding them heavenly aromatic beans, Master Song Feng laughed and walked away. She wanted to save them by herself, but she finally spat out all the heavenly aromatic beans in her mouth. She didn't know what Master Song Feng did to her body, but her cultivation level was restricted and her mind was also affected. She was in a daze and couldn't use her strength. Then Xinxingji pounced on her and tore her clothes. She resisted desperately, but when she thought she couldn't escape, her strength suddenly disappeared. She couldn't hold on anymore and passed out. She suddenly remembered that before she passed out, she seemed to have heard a sigh. That voice was a bit familiar. She grabbed Xianxia's clothes and said, "It's Wuxia. She saved me." Wuxia? Who was she? Wuxia is Master Song Feng's disciple. We met her before, and she was also the one who led Master Song Feng here. Thinking of Wuxia, Xianxia didn't know whether she should hate her or be grateful. Master Song Feng was led here by her, but in the end, she was able to survive because she extended a helping hand. Xianxia listened to her slowly talk about what happened after the two of them were separated, as well as some things she still remembered. In the end, she said, "It should be Wuxia." She came back later and knocked Xinxingji unconscious. "I recognize her voice." Xianxia was silent for a moment, then said, "Fortunately, Master Song Feng really deserved it. If he didn't treat his disciple like that, how could this Miss Nye take the risk to save you? In my opinion, when you escaped from the fog with her, she reported it to her master. I just didn't expect Master Song Feng to come up with such a shameless idea." He paused for a moment, then continued, "Even if she also had a part in this matter, she saved you after all. If we meet her in the future, we should be lenient." Xianxia nodded, then sighed. She's also a pitiful person. Master Song Feng didn't treat her like a disciple. Even if she was a servant, he wouldn't treat her like this. She smiled, then bent down and hugged her tightly. "I'm just glad that you're really okay." After the disaster, this kind of hug made Xianxia feel very satisfied. The two of them hugged for a while, then she suddenly asked, "Senior Marshal Brother, if this kind of thing really happened, what would you do?" She didn't let go of her, so Xianxia couldn't see his expression. After a while, she only heard him say, "Of course I'd tear Master Song Feng into pieces." This wasn't the answer Xianxia wanted to hear, so she asked again, "What about me? Would you still want me?" This time, she didn't answer for a long time. It was so long that Xianxia felt disappointed. Then she heard him chuckle and let go of her. He looked her in the eyes and said with incomparable sincerity, "No matter what you look like or what happened to you, you're Xianxia. I love you, so I absolutely won't abandon you." This was the first time he said he loved her. Although none of these things happened, although it was just a promise, Xianxia felt she was still willing to believe him and believe he didn't lie. Chapter 304. The most dangerous place on Demonic Mountain was Immortal's ruins, and the most mysterious place in Immortal's ruins was Jade Palace. The two of them talked about their feelings after they parted. When Tiange heard Lord Daoist Jinghe went to Jade Palace, she asked about it. Qin, she said, Jade Palace is said to be the immortal residence where immortals rested during the Great War between immortals and demons, so the fallen immortals were buried nearby, forming Immortal's ruins. There are many relics left by immortals in Jade Palace. Although most of them are damaged and some of them are too dense for cultivators like us to use, there are also some strange things. If you get them, it'll be a great fated chance. Tiange knew a little about this, but it seemed a bit unusual this time. Aside from Jade Palace, there are also many treasures in other places on Demonic Mountain, right? Why did all the nascent soul cultivators go to Jade Palace this time? Qin, she said with a smile, naturally, they got some news that there are rare treasures in Jade Palace. At this point, a trace of doubt appeared in his eyes, and he said with uncertainty, Master told me that a treasure appeared in the Jade Palace last time. 4 nascent soul cultivators like them, it might be able to break through in one go, so this time, many nascent soul cultivators want to go to the Jade Palace to try their luck. It's actually such a treasure? Tiange was very surprised. The higher one's cultivation level was, the fewer treasures that could advance one's cultivation level, so most nascent soul cultivators were stuck in the early stage of nascent soul. A few entered the middle stage of nascent soul, and very few entered the late stage of nascent soul. There were only 4 or 5 in the entire celestial pole in the past thousands of years. Many nascent soul cultivators reached the peak of their realm after hundreds of years of cultivation but lacked fated chances to advance. Their master, Lord Daoist Jinghe, was the same. If it was really such a treasure, it was no wonder so many nascent soul cultivators went to Jade Palace. As Qin she spoke, he then shook his head. But it's hard to say. Such a treasure already appeared last time. How could it be so coincidental that it appeared again this time? I'm a bit worried about Master's trip. Tiange nodded, feeling a bit heavy. With so many nascent soul cultivators, if there was a conflict. But with Master's strength, it shouldn't be difficult for him to stay alive. The two of them pondered each other for a while, then Qin, she said, Master knows what he's doing, so we don't need to worry about him. It's getting late. Let's retrieve your father's remains and get out of here as soon as possible. Yes. Tiange stood up and pondered for a moment. She then lowered her head to look at the heavenly aromatic herbs that covered the entire mountain. Since we've encountered them, why don't we take some of these heavenly aromatic beans back? It'll be easier to exchange for the chalcedony. Qin, she stared at these heavenly aromatic beans and recalled what she almost experienced. He felt displeased and said, What do you want them for? I've found the chalcedony. The two of them had only been apart for such a short period of time, and he already had a chalcedony? From inside his robe, Qin, she took out the Xian Fire Jade Essence. It was sparkling, translucent, and about the size of 2 palms. Where did you get such a good chalcedony? Tiange was pleasantly surprised as she took the chalcedony. This kind of chalcedony was at least several thousand years old. Furthermore, it didn't have the slightest trace of impurities. It was definitely a high-quality chalcedony. More importantly, there was enough chalcedony. Even if he failed, he could refine it again. Qin, she smiled. The Wan and Feng duo from Biyun sect gave it to me. In the end, it was for Master's sake. Tiange raised her head and smiled. Master's reputation is really valuable. Such a big chalcedony can't be bought outside. Qin, she also smiled. This is great. Your heaven and earth fan can finally be refined. The other materials had long been prepared. They also found the Qiyun stone, and now they also had the 1,000-year-old chalcedony. They could refine magic weapons after returning from Demonic Mountain. Tiange put the chalcedony into her Qiankuan bag. The two of them rested for a while, then summoned their flying magic weapons, planning to leave Lonely Peak. The two of them flew into the air. Qin, she stood on the flying cloud and looked down at the heavenly aromatic beans that covered the entire mountain. He frowned and raised his hand. Fire's spiritual aura gathered in his palm, forming a fireball. With a wave of his hand, the fireball fell on the mountain peak and burst into flames. Upon seeing this, Tiange shouted, "You're burning all of them?" These heavenly aromatic herbs had been rooted here for a longer time than the spiritual plants in her virtual sky world. Wouldn't it be a pity to burn them? She snorted. Keeping them is also a scourge. These things might be useful to others, but for him, they were really unpleasant memories. Tiange thought about it and felt he was right. Without these heavenly aromatic herbs, she wouldn't have almost experienced such a terrible thing, so she didn't say anything. The fire grew bigger and bigger, engulfing the entire peak. Soon, all the heavenly aromatic herbs were burned, and the heavenly aromatic beans in the fire made crackling sounds. Seeing that all the heavenly aromatic herbs were burned, she held her in his arms. "Let's go." Tiange nodded. It was good to burn them all. Burning them made her feel better. She didn't want to recall that memory. By the way, where's Xinxia? She suddenly thought of this question. She said faintly, "I told him to go first." He looked down and glanced at Tiange. "I think you'll be unhappy to see him." Tiange was touched. She really didn't want to see Xinxia again. It was hard for him to even think of this. The two of them followed the feng shui compass left by Lord Daoist Jinghe and smoothly went out of the fog. Lord Daoist Jinghe once said they were in the depths of Immortal's ruins. There were too many dangers and it wasn't a place core formation cultivators like them should come to. She also knew this, so he took Tiange back to tens of thousands of feet peak. A day later, after several close calls, the two of them finally returned to their original route. She breathed a sigh of relief. There aren't any demonic beasts here. If we're careful, we should be able to reach our destination in half a day. Tiange was a little excited when she thought of their destination. She nodded. The two of them walked along the rocks and entered a dense forest. "Be careful." She said, "This is bone-eroding wood. Just a little bit will make you rot into a pile of bones in an instant." Tiange was shocked. "Its toxicity is so strong? If we take it out, won't it be terrible when we fight against enemies?" She shook his head. "We can't take it out. Although the toxicity of this bone-eroding wood is strong, it disappears very quickly. After it's unearthed, its toxicity will completely disappear in about a day. Putting it in a jade box won't work." "I see." The two of them propped up their protective spiritual aura, released their defensive magic weapons, and cautiously entered the forest. "This way." She led the way, flying close to the ground. The area of this bone-eroding wood was quite large. The two of them were afraid of touching the leaves, so it took them a long time to get out of the forest. After passing through the forest of bone-eroding wood, the scenery in front of them changed. The sky was dark, and the ground was full of holes of various sizes. Some of the holes were still burning, making the surroundings look dark red. Tiange looked around and asked, "Why does this place look like this?" These holes were too small, so they obviously weren't volcanoes, but there were so many of them, which was really strange. She said, "These are traces left by ancient immortals who used fire magic." "Fire spell." Tiange stared at the endless ruins, yearning in her heart. What kind of powerful spell would be able to leave behind such a huge trace? Maybe these things were only done casually by an ancient immortal. "Let's go." "This way." She once again summoned his flying cloud. He pulled Tiange, floated in the air, and slowly flew to the right. In the bone-eroding wood forest, they could only fly close to the ground, but above these holes, they could only fly high. These were fire elemental spells left behind by the immortals. Unfortunately, due to a strange combination of factors, she wandered from place to place for 10 years. Finally, the person he entrusted her to found her, sheltered her for several decades, and even became her lover. She gently knelt down beside her. "Brother Yi, this is probably the last time I'll call you Brother Yi. Today, I came here because Tiange came to collect your remains, and I also came to give you an explanation. I've done what I promised you all these years. Tiange has already grown up and become a core formation cultivator. My responsibility has finally come to an end today. He turned to look at Imotienga, smiled, and held her hand tightly. He then continued to say, Brother Yi, that day, you said that if your daughter had a pure Yin constitution and spiritual roots, I'd be in charge of dual cultivation. I'm well aware of what you're implying. Although today's result is the same, I want to make it clear to you that Tienga and I love each other, so this has nothing to do with you. You can rest assured. Chapter 305. After a simple ceremony with Qin Shi, Imotienga apologized to the skeleton and put it into the jar she prepared one by one, preparing to take it back to the secular world and bury it with her mother. When she was traveling in the foundation building realm, she wanted to go back to the Mo family's village. At that time, she had already entered the territory of Jin, but she was attracted by the spiritual aura fluctuation of Ziwei's Immortal's cave. It had been 76 years since she went back. 76 years. Her grandparents and uncles must have turned into skeletons, and Tianjun and the others must have died, right? She didn't know if her mother's grave was taken care of in a few days. She planned to go back to the Mo family's village in Jin to move her mother's remains and second uncle's ashes back to the Yi family's ancestral grave. After putting away her father's remains, Imotienga looked up and carefully looked at the cave they hid in. The rock walls were illuminated by the immortal fire, which was very hot. Did you hide here? Qin Shi crouched down and poked the corner with the 3-yang real fire sword as if he was looking for something. When he heard her voice, he answered, When the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, your father and I hid in tens of thousands of feet peak. After things stabilized a bit, we found we couldn't get out, so we went to Immortal's ruins. The reason I came here is because I want to cultivate a secret technique. At that time, your father was seriously injured. If we left him alone, he wouldn't have lived for more than a few days. He saved me on the way, so I brought him here. I see. This was indeed the best place to practice Yang spells. Fire was the most important element of Yang, especially since this place was full of immortal fire. After a while, Qin Shi breathed a sigh of relief and stood up. I finally found it. Imotienga asked curiously, What are you looking for? Qin Shi walked back and spread his hands. Here it's this. Several pitch-black stones lay in his palm. Imotienga picked one up and felt the heat was pressing down on her. She thought about it and was surprised. Are these fire essence stones? Qin Shi nodded with a smile. Yes, they are. The so-called fire essence stone was a kind of or produced in places with abundant real fire and was commonly known as the essence of fire. In the beginning, the fire essence stone was red. As the real fire essence stone burned for a long time, the red became darker and darker until it finally turned black. These fire essence stones were pitch black in color. Clearly, they were of the highest grade. This is what you want to get? Qin Shi said, Back then, I found fire pith stones in this fire pit. I tried my best to take them out of the immortal fire, but the fire was still too strong. I couldn't take them away, so I hid them here. So, you wanted to come back then? There's nothing we can do about it. Back then, you left in such a hurry that you didn't even take your father's corpse with you. Naturally, you have to come back. When he mentioned this matter, Imotienga once again recalled what he said. Right, what did my father promise you back then? Why did you say that the matter of dual cultivation is up to you? Upon hearing this, Qin Shi coughed and looked away. Upon noticing that his face was a bit red, Imotienga became even more curious. What? Is there something you can't say? There's no harm in telling you. Qin Shi smiled and said slowly, No matter which cultivator you tell about a pure Yin constitution, they might be tempted. Your father thought of this, so he said this. This means that I can choose a dual cultivation partner for you, no matter who it is. You can also choose yourself? Your father indeed had this intention, but I didn't have this idea at that time. Believe me, upon seeing him hurriedly denying it, Imotienga smiled. It's not like I don't believe you. What's the rush? She sighed and said, I understand what my father meant. In that case, although I don't have the freedom to perform dual cultivation, I can still cultivate diligently. I also have a backer. Relatively speaking, I still have a future. If the person her father entrusted to wasn't him, this would probably be her future. Correct. Xianxia said, I won't deny that back then. If you really had a pure Yin constitution and spiritual roots, it would be good for Xianxing school to accept you as a disciple and have dual cultivation with other disciples. But you ran away by yourself, so I didn't think about this matter anymore. The two of them were silent for a while. Imotienga smiled and said, Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. We've already achieved our goal. Are we going to leave now? Xianxia nodded. Master specifically reminded me to leave as soon as we finished our business. He said there might be a collapse of a big restriction this time, and it might be even bigger than last time. It wouldn't be good if we got implicated. Imotienga didn't object. Aside from being fed heavenly aromatic beans, she didn't suffer any injuries. The effects of the heavenly aromatic beans had long worn off, so she had abundant spiritual power now. Then let's go. It'll be half a month in 3 to 5 days. It's hard to say when the restriction at the entrance of Demonic Mountain will appear. The two of them rested for a while, prepared everything and went out the way they came. Imotienga looked at the countless holes on the ground burning with immortal fire. She suddenly thought of something and asked Xianxia, even the ordinary stones here probably have the power of immortal fire sealed in them, right? Xianxia nodded. Why do you ask? Imotienga said, Then, do you have a way to get some up here? Xianxia glanced at her but didn't say anything. He took out the 3-yang real fire sword, which emitted a dazzling light. The sword light shot straight down and instantly shot back. He stretched out his hand and used his fire spiritual aura to catch several stones. He handed them to her and said, Put them in a jade box. They were just ordinary stones. Even if they were calcined by immortal fire, they should still be preserved in a jade box. Imotienga obediently put them in the jade box and asked him to use the 3-yang real fire sword to get some more stones back. Only when the jade box was full did she put it into her Chenkuan bag. After watching her put the stones away, Xianxia asked, You don't practice fire spells. What do you need these stones for? Imotienga smiled and patted her spiritual beast pouch. You forgot that I have Xiaohua. Xianxia suddenly understood. That little spiritual beast was born with sun real fire. If it practiced well, it would definitely be a good helper in the future. After thinking for a while, Xianxia said, You have Xiaohua for spiritual beasts, and you have the soul-refining art for unique skills. If you refine the heaven and earth fan, you won't lose to ordinary middle-stage core formation cultivators in fights of magical powers. If the power of the heaven and earth fan is amazing, you can also fight against late-stage core formation cultivators. However, you'd better practice several secret techniques. There are always variables in fights of magical powers, so save some unique skills to save your life. Imotienga also thought about this. Her best unique skill to save her life was the virtual sky world. Of course, after the incident with Ren Yufeng, she realized that no unique skill was completely reliable, so she'd better prepare several backup plans. Unfortunately, we didn't get any useful treasures on this trip. Otherwise, your cultivation level could also improve. Imotienga thought about it and held back her words. She wasn't in a hurry to improve her cultivation level. She had an unlimited supply of clear sky pills and her qualifications weren't bad. Reaching the peak stage of the core formation realm was only a matter of time. This time, she found the 1,000-year-old chalcedony and the Qiyun stone, so she was already very happy. Senior Martial Brother, now that you've found the fire essence stone, are you going to enter closed-door meditation when we go back? Xianxia nodded. He keenly noticed that she was a bit depressed, so he asked, What's wrong? Are you unhappy? Imotienga was stunned for a while then sighed. I think this time, you must be very confident in advancing to the nascent soul realm, right? At that time, our cultivation levels will be one big realm apart. What's the matter? Xianxia said with a smile. Which pair of dual cultivation partners doesn't have a cultivation level gap? Even among the Luan and Feng couple, Ding Luan's cultivation level is slightly higher than Feng Zhao's, but don't they still cultivate and live together? That's true. But Imo always felt that the cultivation level gap between them was a bit too big. It wasn't that there weren't nascent soul cultivators and core formation cultivators who became partners, but relatively speaking, the proportion of female cultivators among nascent soul cultivators was very small. Many male cultivators married core formation female cultivators, but their dual cultivation relationships were mostly subordinate. Of course, she wasn't worried about Xianxia. How could she not trust him now? However, this couldn't go on. Cultivators in the same realm should communicate more and help each other, so their relationship would be more stable. Xianxia thought for a while, then said, "What I said last time, we'll practice the same cultivation technique. Have you thought about it?" It's a good method. You were very confident last time, so did you prepare for it? Xianxia smiled. Of course. Imo was curious. You know our physiques are special, and the cultivation technique we practice is also special. Does the dual cultivation technique you mentioned also have this miraculous effect? Xianxia smiled but didn't answer. He was anxious because of her urging, so he just said, "You'll know later." The two of them talked all the way back along the path they came from. After half a day, they finally returned to tens of thousands of feet peak. They spent another day going down from tens of thousands of feet peak. Once they were out of the range of tens of thousands of feet peak, both of them heaved sighs of relief. There were many dangers in Immortal's ruins, so it was much safer down there. But after a while, Imo was surprised. What are they doing? This was the third time she saw a group of people fighting each other. They fought irrationally, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. The scene was so tragic that she couldn't bear to see it. Xianxia frowned and said, "The restrictions on Demonic Mountain only disappear for about a month, and it's already been more than half a month. Presumably, these people have already found all the treasures they can find inside, and those who can't can only target other people." Imo also heard a lot of these things. But this time, the people fighting each other had extremely high cultivation levels. Most of them were in the core formation realm, and there were very few in the foundation building realm. She thought about Jade Palace again. So many nascent soul cultivators went there for the same unique treasure, so a fierce battle was inevitable. This time, even if the restrictions on Demonic Mountain didn't collapse, many people would have died. The two of them had achieved their purpose of entering Demonic Mountain, so they didn't want to get involved in these things. Whenever they encountered a fight, they avoided it. But they were lucky. They often encountered fights where both sides were injured or even killed, so they took a lot of Qianquan bags along the way. These Qianquan bags alone were already a great fortune. After picking up another batch of Qianquan bags, Imo smiled until her eyes narrowed. It's really interesting. They fight to death, but we're better off picking up ready-made treasures. Xianxia also smiled and said shamelessly, "If everyone was as smart as us, of course we wouldn't be able to pick up any treasures. Put them all away. Maybe there are some treasures inside." Imo didn't stand on ceremony and put all the Qianquan bags into her bosom. There were so many of them. They might even be richer than her own net worth. Just as they were counting, they suddenly heard a muffled thunder in the sky. Xianxia looked up and saw that in the sky, where spiritual aura and devil aura intertwined, the wind and clouds surged and violently collided. The spiritual aura and devil aura in Demonic Mountain instantly became chaotic. Not good. The restrictions collapsed. Chapter 306. It wasn't his first time experiencing the collapse of restrictions, so Xianxia was very calm. He unfolded the 3-yang real fire sword, spread the sword formation, and flew forward while pulling Imo. The flying cloud reached its maximum speed, flying towards the exit of Demonic Mountain. Along the way, countless cultivators flew towards the exit in unison. This was the time to escape, so everyone used their trump cards. No one dared to hold anything back. Even so, Some cultivators who couldn't escape in time were sucked into the collapsing restrictions and instantly turned into black ashes. Mo Tiange saw with her own eyes that Daoist Kumu and Tong Tianyun, who came with them, were also sucked into the restrictions and died instantly. Not long after they entered Demonic Mountain, they were separated from those two people. Later, they learned from Jing Xingji that those two people indeed harbored evil intentions. They left Madame Feng in the lurch and watched as Lei Dongqing perished, but the two of them relied on that 10,000-year-old spiritual plant to hook up with a nascent soul cultivator and enter Immortal's ruins. Now that the two of them appeared here, they probably didn't get any benefits even if they helped the nascent soul cultivators. Shi and Qin Shi, who had nascent soul masters, didn't think about going in with Lord Daoist Jinghe. Did they really think those nascent soul cultivators would protect them for a 10,000-year-old spiritual herb? Maybe they knew, but their lifespans were about to run out, so they didn't care. The restrictions collapsed faster and faster, and the rumbling sounds were endless. Countless cultivators rushed towards the exit. Qin Shi was calm at first, but he became anxious later on. Such a big movement was even more terrible than the one 80 years ago. Master was right. This time was more dangerous than last time. But no matter how fast they ran, they couldn't outrun the collapsing restrictions. Soon, the cultivators not far behind them were also sucked in, and their screams were endless. "No!" Mo Tiange shouted. "We can't escape like this. How could Qin Shi not know that?" But where could they find a safe place at this time? Last time, when the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, he and Yi Hai were lucky to hide in the cave on tens of thousands of feet peak. Otherwise, they definitely couldn't escape. At this time, he couldn't afford to hold back anymore. The sword formation spread out and shone brightly, blocking more and more drifting restrictions in the air. His hands didn't stop moving as he fished out several treasures from his Qiankuan bag. He patted some on himself and gave some to Mo Tiange. He said anxiously, "At least it can block them for a while." The sound of thunder resounded overhead. Mo Tiange's expression changed. She heard Qin Shi say, "It's too late. I can only risk it." Right after he said that, he made a hand seal and circulated the spiritual aura in his body. He was about to use a secret technique. Mo Tiange was startled. Although she didn't know what kind of secret technique Qin Shi was using, she could tell he was using his blood essence. Once such a spell was used, the best result would be a period of rest, but the worst result would be a regression in cultivation. He was already at the peak stage of the core formation realm. If his cultivation level regressed, he didn't know how long it would take for him to reach the nascent soul realm. "Senior brother, don't." Qin Shi didn't pay attention to her. Several drops of blood essence were forced out of his body. He stretched out his hand and wiped it, and the blade of his sword instantly shone with a red light. Just as he was about to activate the 3-yang real fire sword, his spiritual aura suddenly became unstable, and the red light on the 3-yang real fire sword dimmed. His expression changed. He used his blood essence to search for Mo Tiange's whereabouts before, so he lost some of his strength. Now, he couldn't even use the secret technique. Qin Shi was really anxious when he realized this. He was very calm before because of this secret technique. At worst, he could take Mo Tiange out even if he got injured. But he didn't expect that he couldn't use the secret technique because he used his blood essence before. "Tiange!" His mind was full of thoughts. In the end, Qin Shi clenched his teeth, pulled Mo Tiange's hand, and said, "If we can't escape, we'll die together." He didn't wait for her to answer and once again turned into a flight light, flying towards the exit. Their lives were at stake now. All of a sudden, Mo Tiange pulled his hand back and stopped. "Tiange!" Qin Shi was anxious. "What's wrong?" Mo Tiange looked up with a solemn expression. Black clouds surged and covered the whole sky. Obviously, the initial instability of the restrictions triggered the collapse of a large area of the restrictions in the sky. If this continued, it would only take a while for the restrictions to collapse here. Although Qin Shi's flying cloud was extremely fast, it was really hard to say whether he could escape or not. Qin Shi was anxious. "If we don't leave now, it'll be too late." Mo Tiange didn't say anything. She held his waist, gathered spiritual aura on her fingertips, and touched the space between her eyebrows. A huge round bead loomed between her eyebrows, emitting a hazy white light. Xianxia's eyes widened. The sound of wind and thunder in the sky became more intense. The speed at which the restrictions collapsed was faster than they expected. People were constantly being sucked in. They didn't even have time to scream before they disappeared without a trace. Emotienga silently recited an incantation and cast the incantation on the bead. The white light suddenly exploded, engulfing the two of them. When the white light disappeared, Xianxia was stunned. Bamboo house, bamboo forest, a gentle breeze, a flowing brook, and the smell of medicine lingering around the tip of his nose. It was a somewhat familiar but completely different scene. After entering the virtual sky world, Emotienga breathed a sigh of relief. Fei wagged its tail, threw itself into her arms, and squeaked. She smiled and hugged Fei affectionately. In the end, she patted its head and released Xiaohua from the spiritual beast bag, letting the two of them play. She took a closer look. The medicinal field hadn't been cleaned for a long time, and weeds had grown in it again. She took out 2 stone sculpture puppets from her Qiankuan bag and told them to clean up the medicinal field. These 2 puppets had extraordinary strength, so they were just right to do these chores for her. When she was done, she looked up and saw that Xianxia had finally come back to his senses. There was shock in his eyes, but also understanding. When his eyes met hers, he sighed and said, "I finally understand. Turns out this is your biggest secret." Emotienga smiled, pulled him into the bamboo house, picked up a praying mat, and threw it to him. "You don't need to ask about other things, right?" Xianxia gradually understood. Her pill concocting skills, her medicinal pills, her 10,000-year-old spiritual plants, her spiritual beasts' cultivation levels, and all her puzzling things originated from here, the virtual sky world. He thought for a while and asked, "Where did you get this virtual sky world? It shouldn't be a gift from your great ancestor, right?" Emotienga shook her head. Zhong Muling said there were only 2 known virtual sky worlds, and both of them belonged to deification cultivators. How could he have given her one? Even if he had one, she was only a foundation-building cultivator back then, so he wouldn't have given it to her. Then how did you get it? Emotienga thought for a while then said, "It can be considered a fated chance. When I got it, I didn't know what it was. Later, when I entered my great ancestor's virtual sky world, I realized it was this thing." At that time, Xianxia nodded in understanding. "No wonder your cultivation level rose so fast from then on. It turned out it wasn't only because you obtained the art of the origin, but also because you obtained such a heaven-defying treasure." Emotienga smiled when she saw that his tone was full of emotion but there was no greed in his eyes. Letting him know such a big secret was originally a gamble. Fortunately, he hadn't betrayed her trust so far. "Aren't you going to ask why I didn't tell you?" Xianxia smiled when he heard this question. He reached out to touch her face and said, "Do you need to ask? Even if it was me, I wouldn't tell such a big secret to others. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. This is especially true in the cultivation world. It's best that you know how to protect yourself." Emotienga looked up at him and asked, "So, if I never told you, you wouldn't blame me?" Xianxia shook his head. "Why would I blame you? Even if you never told me for the rest of your life, I wouldn't blame you. In fact, I think it's already quite risky for you to bring me here today. Are you so sure I won't have any bad intentions after seeing this virtual sky world?" Emotienga hesitated for a moment then answered, "I didn't have time to think about anything else just now. I just thought we couldn't die there. Besides, this virtual sky world has already recognized me as its master. You can't hurt me here." "If I were really scheming, I wouldn't have hurt you here," Xianxia said. Xianxia said, "If nothing happens to me here after I learn your secret, but I imprison you and interrogate you after we go out, what would you do?" His tone was harsh and even accusatory. Emotienga was stunned and asked, "Isn't it good for me to trust you?" Xianxia sighed and said, "I know you trust me, but it's hard to judge a person's heart. Trust sometimes comes with a price, and the price you have to pay is too high. If you're not careful, you'll be crushed to pieces. Seeing that Tiange lowered her head after being scolded, she smiled again. Of course, I can be an exception, but there can't be a next time, understand? Tiange smiled. Of course there won't be a next time. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have brought you here. She had thought about this question many times. If it weren't for today's life-threatening situation, she wouldn't have brought Xianxia here. In fact, after bringing him here, she was also nervous, but Xianxia's reaction just now made her feel that her trust was worth it. Thinking of today's dangerous situation, she asked worriedly, "Master is still in Immortal's ruins. Will he be in danger?" This question made Xianxia silent for a while. How could he not be worried? But now that the great restriction on Demonic Mountain had collapsed, they couldn't go out. "Master won't die so easily," he said. "Let's take care of ourselves first. After a few days, when the restriction is stable, we'll look for Master's whereabouts." Tiange also didn't have any good ideas, so she could only do this. Feeling the heavy atmosphere between them, she smiled and said, "Since we're here, I'll take you to see the medicinal field. My pill concocting skills aren't as good as yours, so you might be able to give me some advice on how to deal with these spiritual plants." As she spoke, she pulled him to the medicinal field and told him about some things in the virtual sky world. She looked at the densely packed medicinal plants in the medicinal field and was shocked for a long time. He then sighed and said, "These medicinal plants are enough for a big cultivation group to use for hundreds of years. If they're not picked excessively, they'll be enough to support a cultivation group to dominate the celestial pole. That's true, but I don't dare to take them out. A 10,000-year-old spiritual plant can make nascent soul cultivators fight for it. With so many, I don't know what kind of turmoil it will cause." "And you're right," Xianxia agreed. "Even if they rot here, we can't take them out casually. Otherwise, not only will you be in trouble, but the celestial pole will also be in chaos." He lowered his head and looked at the surrounding medicinal fields. There were many spirit herbs that he had only heard of in legends but had never seen before. These spirit herbs had been trimmed, and their ages ranged from 10,000 years to 1,000 years to a few hundred years. Some of them had only just sprouted. "You said the virtual sky world has existed for hundreds of thousands of years, but why are the oldest spiritual plants only tens of thousands of years old?" Tiange learned about this from the memory in the virtual sky world. Spiritual plants also have a lifespan. Generally, their lifespan ranges from 10,000-year-old to tens of thousands of years, so it's best to pick them and refine them into medicinal pills when they're 10,000-year-old. Because at that time, their medicinal properties have reached their limit. If they continue to grow, they'll die. "I see." It was Xianxia's first time hearing about this. In the current cultivation world, 10,000-year-old spiritual plants rarely appeared, so no one really knew about this. Standing in the middle of the medicinal field, Tiange looked at the many spiritual plants that had reached 10,000 years old. She then looked at the two busy stone sculpture puppets and said with a smile, "Since we can't go out, help me tidy up the medicinal field." Chapter 307. After the big restriction on Demonic Mountain collapsed, many smaller restrictions followed suit. Almost half of Demonic Mountain was involved. Tiange and Xianxia were lucky. They entered the virtual sky world in time and weren't affected. The others, however, weren't so lucky. Very few of them managed to escape Demonic Mountain in time. Even many nascent soul cultivators perished inside. This trip to Demonic Mountain was even more tragic than the one over 80 years ago. The casualties of high-level cultivators were disastrous, even more serious than the demonic beast riot last time. The celestial pole was in an uproar. Of course, the two of them didn't know about these things yet. While hiding in the virtual sky world, Tiange occasionally opened it to look at the situation outside. She found that the chain reaction caused by the collapse of the restriction hadn't stopped. The sky fell, the earth cracked, lightning flashed, and the whole Demonic Mountain shook. Since they couldn't go out, The two of them had to put aside the things outside for the time being and live their own lives in the virtual sky world. First of all, Xianxia lost some strength because he used his blood essence. Fortunately, the concentration of spiritual aura in the virtual sky world was extremely high, so it was faster to heal here than outside. But the strange thing was that Xianxia said the spiritual aura here had to be transformed by the art of 3 primordial cycles before he could quickly absorb it into his dantian. Otherwise, his cultivation speed wouldn't be much faster than outside. The two of them pondered this situation for a long time and finally guessed that the world had changed. Cultivation techniques had also evolved, and the virtual sky world still maintained the concentration of spiritual aura from the distant past era, which was why this situation occurred. Immortal wasn't affected because she practiced cultivation techniques from the distant past era. As for Xianxia, his art of 3 primordial cycles originated from the distant past era. But Immortal also thought that his pure yang technique came from Yuan Bao, who lived in Zhong Muling's virtual sky world all year round, so why couldn't he? After asking Xianxia, he also couldn't understand. Perhaps Yuan Bao thought he wouldn't enter the virtual sky world again, so he didn't tell him some trick? The two of them couldn't understand this problem with their cultivation levels, so they simply left it behind. In any case, it wasn't like they couldn't cultivate here. Secondly, since they couldn't leave the virtual sky world, Immortal had nothing to do, so she simply tidied up the medicinal fields with Xianxia. She had picked many 10,000-year-old spiritual plants but hadn't refined them into medicinal pills yet. There were still many spiritual plants growing in the medicinal fields. She instructed the 2 puppets to pick them one by one and reorganize the medicinal fields. These spirit grasses were refined into pills by them. Xianxia's pill concocting skills were also extremely high. With the two of them working together, their pill concocting speed became much faster. A year later, the medicinal fields were finally tidied up. At this time, Xianxia's injuries were almost healed, so Immortal began to consider refining her natal magic weapon. Before this, she originally planned to ask the group's tools refiners to refine tools for her, but she didn't know how long she'd have to stay in the virtual sky world, so she could only rely on herself for everything. Thus, she began to learn tool refining again. However, her talent in tool refining really wasn't very good. There were spiritual plants everywhere in the virtual sky world, but there weren't many materials needed for tool refining. In the end, it was Xianxia who couldn't bear to see her like this, so he personally refined for her. Xianxia's talent in miscellaneous studies was higher than hers. Whether it was pill concocting, tool refining, or even talisman crafting, he had a considerable level of skill. However, he did not dare to be careless when it came to refining a natal magic treasure, so he spent a lot of time practicing again. The two of them slowly cultivated while learning how to refine weapons. Just like that, years passed by. In the beginning, Immortal often went to see what was going on outside the virtual sky world, but the collapse of Demonic Mountain this time lasted for a long time. In the end, she only went to see it after a long time. When she opened the virtual sky world again and saw that it was still dark outside, Immortal sighed. This was already the 5th year, but the restrictions were still unstable. She really didn't know when they could go out. Before the restrictions collapsed, Master went to Jade Palace. She didn't know whether he escaped or not. Jinji had been missing for several years at that time. Could he go back now? Don't think about it. When the time comes, you'll naturally be able to go out. Xianxia's voice came from behind her. Immortal waved her sleeves, erased the scene outside, then turned around. Why did you come out? They failed to refine the heaven and earth fan once, so he shut himself in his room for many days. He said he couldn't fail again and had to carefully figure out the characteristics of the materials. Xianxia smiled. I finished my research, so I came out. Immortal's eyes brightened. Then can we refine it again? And Xianxia thought for a moment and said, it should be possible. How's your cultivation these days? Very smooth. Immortal reached out her hand. Take a look. Xianxia put his hand on her pulse and separated a wisp of spiritual aura to test her pulse. After a while, he withdrew his spiritual aura and said with a smile, Your cultivation here is indeed twice the result with half the effort. With clear sky pills and the virtual sky world, her cultivation speed was simply fast compared to ordinary cultivators. Even if she encountered a bottleneck, she didn't need to worry too much with the experienced Xianxia guiding her. What about you? When will you form your nascent soul? The two of them were trapped here and didn't know when they could go out. Xianxia's cultivation level had reached the peak, and his mentality had also adjusted. It could be said that forming his nascent soul was already a matter of course. This question made Xianxia ponder for a long time. In the end, he said, "When I form my nascent soul, I'll definitely use the art of 3 primordial cycles as the main method, so forming my nascent soul here won't affect me. But there's no need to worry. Let's refine your natal magic weapon first." Xianxia said with a smile. The youngest known person to form their nascent soul in the celestial pole was 208 years old. You're 206 years old now. Forming your nascent soul now can still set a record, but it won't be so sensational in a few years. Don't you want to break this record? Xianxia shook his head and said with a faint smile, "What's the point of fighting for these empty titles? There's no harm in delaying it for a year or two." Xianxia felt relieved upon hearing what he said. In the past few years, Xianxia's mentality was too impatient, so he failed to form his nascent soul again and again. Now that he was so calm, it could be seen that his mentality was stable. In that case, there wouldn't be any big obstacles when he formed his nascent soul. In fact, Xianxia's mentality was originally very stable. In the past few years, he completely walked into the trap he set himself, so a loophole appeared in his mentality. The root of this loophole was Xianxia. Now that the two of them were already in love, he naturally restored his original calm and tranquil state of mind. The two of them talked for a while, then went back to their respective cultivations. Their cultivation techniques didn't conflict with each other. One was a pure yang cultivator while the other was a pure yin cultivator, so they complemented each other. Therefore, they didn't need to use 2 separate cultivation rooms and could directly cultivate together in Xianxia's original cultivation room. After a day of adjusting their breaths, both their spiritual aura and mentality were restored to their peak, so they prepared to refine magic weapons. Refining a natal magic weapon was different from refining ordinary magic weapons. Even if ordinary magic weapons needed to recognize their master, the owner didn't need to be present during the refining process. Natal magic weapons, on the other hand, had to be refined with a cultivator's blood essence. Therefore, although Xianxia took charge of refining, he still needed Xianxia's cooperation. After a failed refinement, Xianxia was particularly cautious this time. Qiyun stones were only enough for them to refine one more time. If they failed again, they would have to look for materials again. However, Qiyun stones were extremely difficult to find, so it might take them several decades to find them. Xianxia used his extreme yang real fire to refine the weapons. Sunstone or Xiaohua's extreme yang real fire were both good, but Xianxia's extreme yang real fire was a bit stronger. He also had countless restorative panaceas to eat, so he chose to use extreme yang real fire. Once everything was ready, the two of them closed themselves in the refining room, laid a barrier to prevent the 2 spiritual beasts from disturbing them, and started refining. This refining process took more than a month. This wasn't a long time for a natal magic weapon. If it weren't for Xianxia's extreme yang real fire melting materials quickly and his previous practice, it would have taken at least a few months. After more than a month, the two of them stepped out of the refining room. The heaven and earth fan was completed. Dragon bones were used as the frame, natural silk brocade as the fan surface, Qiyun stones and bewitching moonlight stones were smelted as paint, and mountains, rivers, flowers, and birds were painted on the fan surface. Finally, it was wrapped in 1,000-year-old chalcedony and refined carefully. The hardness of dragon bones and the toughness of 1,000-year-old chalcedony were combined into one. After the heaven and earth fan was successfully refined, it could basically be said to be the toughest magic weapon. Even Xianxia's 3 yang real fire sword couldn't completely destroy it. In the beginning, the two of them had a dispute about the shape of the magic weapon. Xianxia naturally thought it should be a round fan, while Tiange insisted on a folding fan. It was fine if she liked to wear palace clothes, but she usually wore Xianxia school's Daoist robes and only had 1 or 2 hairpins in her hair. How would she look holding a round fan? It wasn't as good as a folding fan. It was suitable for both men and women, and if she occasionally wanted to dress up as a man, she could also pretend to be a scholar or something. She couldn't argue with her, so he had to comply. When the heaven and earth fan was finished, Tiange couldn't take her eyes off it. The landscape made of Qiyun stones and bewitching moonlight stones was so exquisite that it couldn't be distinguished from the real one. The flowers, birds, fish, and insects were vivid. Not to mention its real effect, the fan itself was already extremely beautiful. When the two of them came out of the refining room, she watched Tiange admiring the heaven and earth fan and teased her. "I said you didn't look like a woman, but it turns out you also like beautiful things." Tiange played with the heaven and earth fan in her hand and said, "Who doesn't like beautiful things? It's just that I'm rarely addicted to them." For example, when she first entered Xianxia school, she also liked the hairpins and rings he gave her, but after enjoying them, cultivation was still the most important thing. Alright, let's try the power of the magic weapon first. Whether it's beautiful or not is secondary. Hearing Xi's reminder, Tiange looked up and asked, "How?" She thought about it and said, "This treasure can trap and kill, and it can also trap and defend. How about I try defending first?" Tiange waved the heaven and earth fan and spread its surface. In an instant, the fan was overflowing with light, reflecting a sparkling and lifelike picture of mountains and rivers. She stretched out his left hand and concentrated. With a flash of golden light, the 3-yang real fire sword appeared in his palm. He shook his arm, and the sword turned into a golden light. Surrounded by the real fire, it circled around him twice, then suddenly changed direction and rushed towards Tiange. Tiange watched carefully and immediately used the heaven and earth fan. The picture of mountains and rivers suddenly enlarged and shrouded the sword light like real mountains and rivers. After being surrounded by the mountains and rivers, the sword light stopped and revealed the true form of the 3-yang real fire sword. The sword began to move left and right, but it couldn't break through the seemingly invisible mountains and rivers. Finally, she withdrew the 3-yang real fire sword and said helplessly, "The sword itself can't break through. It seems I have to use my sword." Tiange was overjoyed that the power of the heaven and earth fan was extraordinary. Even if it was only the 3-yang real fire sword itself, ordinary early-stage core formation cultivators couldn't block it. After this test, she had great confidence in the heaven and earth fan. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.